Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are refreshed with a good cup of tea on this Monday afternoon. My name is Saurabh Shah. I'm a member of the IMC Managing Committee. I would like to extend a gracious and an inclusive welcome to all of you to this India Calling session on retail. A very warm welcome to each one of you. Over the last 2 decades, the Indian retail market witnessed phenomenal changes, evolving rapidly from traditional shops to large multi-format stores in mall, offering global perspective and experience, and onto a highly tech-driven e-commerce model. These changes have resulted in unprecedented growth in overall consumption. Friends, it has been rightly said that retail is all about simplicity. It has to work towards making consumer life easier so that they would enjoy buying from you again and again. With this, it is my honor and privilege to invite Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, Non-Executive Chairman of Future Lifestyle Fashion Limited, and past president and one of the pillars of IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to give his address to this August gathering on innovation in retail. May I request Mr. Haribhakti to address the gathering?
Do you want to call all the panelists? Okay. All right. Thank you, Saurabh. Let me begin by welcoming this extremely tight-knit and interested group to the session on retail. It's a simultaneous session, so I want to extend a very warm, personalized welcome to each and every one of you. Let me also begin with a little bit of history and bring you to today's day and age and time. The first so-called Indians began to appear, or history records them, something like 65,000 years ago. And the theory that is today seeming to be validated by both archaeology and genetics is that the out of Africa migration is what caused the first Indians to actually come into existence. And interestingly, at that time, the land masses were so structured that from 4 directions, people could actually walk out of a continent and walk through multiple continents. And as they met climatic challenges, and as they started settling and began to understand agriculture, they made what we now call Basera. And it is reckoned that the minimum number of people that are required to create a community was something like 200 to 250 people. And so multiple communities established themselves. And the key drivers at that time was the fact that there was a contiguous landmass. There was the sea, which we just learned. India is the only country which has an ocean named after it. And there were people. The continents had no names. The human beings had no other adjectives or adverbs associated to them. They were just communities which were trying to work with each other, learn from each other, establish themselves, become sustainable, and then move on, where that sustenance was actually challenged, either by resources getting compromised or exhausted, or simply because they felt that there is a better transition available somewhere else. And so they just move. So the characteristics which drove human society for almost 65,000 years, if you like, was a combination of agriculture, converting to handicrafts, and a little bit of surplus time and labor was associated with getting all of that together. And then suddenly, after many, many, many thousands of years, the Industrial Revolution took place. And within very short period of time, we had the complete transformation of everything that there was in the world into the world that we see today, which is a data-driven, comprehensively information technology-driven world. That transition happened dramatically and very swiftly. So the entire elements of commerce changed. We started seeing the establishment of retail establishments very recently, less than 500 years ago. When you think of the context of the early Indians as 65,000 years, 500 looks like yesterday. And actually that then slowly spread. And it spread in a very differentiated way, depending on where this whole development was taking place. In India, to come down to India's reality, the biggest activity in almost any community was centered around the kirana shop, was centered around serving the community, making sure that you had a personalized knowledge of everybody's needs and you catered to those needs. That was the first establishment of retail in India. And if I were to cut to modern retail, that has a history. I don't know what my panelists rate it at, but no more than 50 years. And of that, the accelerated history is just simply the last 20 years, which I have seen the revolution. I've worked with every one of my panelists in some way, shape, and form at some point in time, because I joined the board of the Future Group almost as one of their first directors. I've been with the group in various companies over the last 20 years of the Future Group's journey. And we have seen how this has transformed. Until today, what is it that we are seeing? We are seeing a combination of three gigantic forces which are driving retail. It is platforms. So you're not really a retail like the physical kirana shop. You're just a platform where buyers and sellers can come together, transact, interact, pay, get their goods, get it delivered, and they go away. That's the Amazon model. We have data. And if you were to compare the human body to various parts of the IT environment that we are now experiencing, the cloud is the brain. Artificial intelligence is where we see all the work happening. Machine learning is where the personalization is happening. IoT is the identification of every good which is ready to move from where it is produced to where it will be consumed. And data analytics is becoming such a bedrock of any interaction in the retail space that I can see, if I drew a further line into the future, that the future will consist of largely machine learning driven decision making. Because as Yuval talks about in his 3 books, The past was Homo Deus, which traced the 65,000 years history, which I very briefly covered. Then there are the issues of today, which we will discuss on the panel. And then there's the future, where the remit of the world has become to transfer as seamlessly as it is possible the collective human intelligence to self-improving, I don't like to call them machines, facilities I would like to call them, which will deliver that decision. So we'll have ultimately a direct to consumer or a consumer to consumer kind of world which will define who will win in the retail space. Today, which means maybe by evening today, Tim Cook is going to unveil to the world Apple's own transformation from a manufacturing-driven company to a service-driven company. Apple is going to transform. There is going to be no talk about a device. There's no talk about there being a new device that will come into being and all of us will be queuing up to buy iPhone 11. No more. Our iPhone 10 should be good. And Apple will transform itself into a services organization. So what is it that the retail industry will need to deliver? They'll need to deliver experiences. And it is amazing that 65,000 years ago also, it was experiences which drove movement, which drove interaction, which drove trade, which drove everything. And even today, the repeat customer is going to come through a channel, buy a particular product, fulfill a particular need, if the experience of doing it encourages a repeat behavior of the same kind. And if I were to distill what we at the Future Group are aiming to do, it would be to create these multitudes of exceptional, memorable experiences at all times. And addressing what is implicit demand, which will be machine learned. Now today you don't even know what you may want because you are not yet aware of the choices that you can make. So it's from that space that the retail story will have to start. How do you make people aware of within their dimension what is even available? And then move into its fulfillment through choice mechanism, through ability to compare prices, ability to have the right experience, ability to feel great about walking into a space, picking up a product, finding it more easily than ever before, picking it up, putting it into your shopping bag, or just eliminating all of that and going through the buying of a book on Amazon, which is an incredible experience. So it is all linked. Today, the idea is how do you satisfy the evoked demand in the mind of a consumer through whatever technology you can put on the ground and fulfill it in a way that that experience will sought to be repeated. And so, what is it that we track? Cash-to-cash cycles, being Instagram first, being selfie ready at all times, having the right look for every occasion, making sure that the brand's perception is actually completely reinforced by social media, digital media, and making them future ready. So it's implicit in all the actions of retailers is to discard very swiftly the legacy that does not work and put in its place a system on a set of processes which will continually create those repeatable experiences. And what is consumer experience? Zero delay in finding what you want. Zero delay in trying what you need to try. For example, if you're in a shop which is selling clothes for big people, to have a trial room which is not reorganized doesn't make sense. The person who wants to get in cannot comfortably try the product, and therefore you'll see physical dimensions changing. You'll have checkout, which is instantaneous. You may be able to walk out because all the digital tracking in RFID infrastructure, and as we saw, Amazon Go will enable you to just pick up what you want and get out of the store, and your credit card will be debited. And there are multiple examples of that from China, which is perhaps at the forefront of retail innovation. Conversing with the salespeople. High definition, experiential stores which are comfortable for you and whoever else accompanies you to the store. The on to offline conversions have to be seamless if you need to be productive. The downsells through formats which are geared to the downsell, even in branded products, can make the difference between successful retail and high inventory. So teamwork, thought leadership, initiative forums, collaborations, sustainable fashion, fashion which is natural, fashion which is in compliance with the emerging needs and aspirations of the entire range of consumers. I think it is not important to only be young ready. It is important to be ready for whoever walks into your frame so that you can create the experiences which are memorable for a person of any age and coming from any background. That is retail 4.0. And if you compare that to manufacturing 4.0, you will see a whole lot of convergence. Every technology that we talked about, the only one maybe I left out was distributed ledger. But quantum computing, distributed ledger, IoT, machine learning, AI, all of them are going to be integrated into retail, just as it's going to be integrated into manufacturing. And so we have an exciting new world. And I would like to invite my exceptional panel to join us to discuss some of the issues which are emerging in retail. May I request Mr. Damodar Mal to join us here? Welcome, Damodar. I'm not reading biodatas because they're already in your distributed material. So he's one of what he speaks will tell you who Damodar Mal is. He heads one of the most exciting retail organizations in this country, which has an ambition which traverses the whole world. They're competitive, they are aggressive, and Damodar will tell you what they do to get there. He is, as you know, the CEO, grocery retail of Reliance Retail. Our next panelist is Mr. B.S. Nagesh. Nagesh. Nagesh comes from a set of retail propositions that all of us like to keep visiting. He has already created the repeat customer by creating the experience. And so we'll hear from him as to how he did that magic. And then we have Mr. Anirudh Deshmukh, who is Managing Director and CEO of Mafatlal Industries. But I had the immense pleasure of working with him when I was, for a few years, on the board of Raymond. So welcome to all of you. And let's kick it off by by discussing what is it that brings the customer in. Let's start with the fundamentals. Damodar.
I think we are all we are in our playground. One thing that is given is incomes are rising, and they've been rising for the last 25, 30 years. And what we sell is the real expression of those incomes. We sell everyday joys, and that expression of higher sense of well-being, that search for fulfillment of taking good things back to one's loved ones, is the desire why the customer steps out and looks for choices. Whether we are physical traders or whether we are digital traders, we are all in the business of being ready when the customer steps out and looks for these small joys of life.
Absolutely wonderful. Nagesh,
Well, I think those days are gone when we say, when will the customer step in? It's becoming like a life partnership between retailer and customer. Those days have gone when shops used to be open for 12 hours, and other 12 hours we used to sleep and customers used to sleep. Today, customers are awake for 24/7. So any one of us who say, I'm going to run a shop for 12 hours, actually better to close the shop. So I think the retailer has to become a partner. The question is, if I open my eyes or if I take my mobile and put my finger, whether your name comes first or your name is amongst the three. Because you won't have more than one partner. Nowadays, people have multiple partners also. So maybe that's the way that things are going to move.
Yeah, I think at a very basic level, as Shailesh has said, that it could be you have a demand and you come to meet that demand. But I think what we are seeing now is that, and Shailesh in fact mentioned it out over there, and this is very, very true. You might not even know that you have a need for something. So how do people bring out the need in you or create a need so that you get to buy something? I mean, the classic examples, I would think Swiggy is a very, very good example. It's not that, you eat. You would be buying from restaurants, you would be ordering food. But what they have done through incorporating everything, whether it is data, whether it is analytics, whether it's artificial intelligence, is to really build a model where a latent need has come out and you're eating probably the same food but paying 5 times more for that. And it's growing phenomenally. So I think that's ultimately what brings in my view, what brings a consumer
brilliant.
into it.
Let's get some audience participation. We have some fantastic people. So, Sunitha, would you like to contribute? What brings the customer in? You've been a great retailer yourself. So,
I think it's the experience. Today, the person wants to experience. Like he said, whoever orders Swiggy has had a very good experience with Swiggy. He likes to be fashionable. He likes to come at the end of the day and find something exotic on his plate, and he wants to call it from whichever restaurant he has been liking or wanting to eat from a long time. So he calls for Swiggy and he has that experience. So it is all about creating an experience. And as I think Reliance Mall is trying to do that by having cafes and things like that within the retail mall, which will sort of make it like a leisurely buying experience,
fabulous. Fabulous. Anybody else? Yes, please.
I have been with Star Bazaar.
Yes.
One of the store managers in Andheri.
Ha.
And what I have found that customers are also looking for some interaction with the store people.
Right.
And many
That
of
conversation has to be
and
rich.
They want to interact. They want to know about the product. They want to see whether somebody else has tried, and that we should encourage at the store.
Fabulous.
That
Fabulous.
too is very, very relevant because you walk into a Star Bazaar and you want to buy organic chili powder. So you need someone to help you because otherwise if you go on looking, you'll go on looking. So
That's why I said zero
feel-
delay in finding.
I feel somebody has to be there to guide you as
Very
to,
true.
Very
Very true. The other issue is the issue of jobs. And we have seen that the debate gets focused on jobs very quickly. Today, in election mode in India, that seems to be the big, and I think that's the big challenge across the globe. What do you do with the fact that agriculture, which at one time occupied 98% of the human race, Today it needs just 2% of the human race to actually create all the food that you need. And what do you do with manufacturing, which is manufacturing 4.0 is fully automated. Any of you who wish to hear this podcast, which I just heard yesterday on manufacturing 4.0, I would encourage you to do it. It's put out by McKinsey and Company. But the only thing which is guaranteed to you is that you will do a different, more enriched job, and lesser people will be doing that more enriched job. So therefore, the job creation machine obviously will be services. And so, Anirudh, let's get your view on how do you see retail actually fulfilling this felt need across the globe?
So let me step back a bit. Discussing a little earlier. If you look at India as a country, I feel that this is borne by facts, is that our domestic per capita consumption is abysmally low. So if you look at India as compared to the BRICS nations, and everywhere we keep talking of the BRICS countries, is that our domestic per capita consumption is about $1,100 or so, whereas China, which is probably the lowest, is about 2,500. And China is a population which is larger than ours. Now, if retail, I feel, has a very, very important role to play in increasing the consumption. Now, this would come in various forms. I mean, we talked of the Swiggy example. Swiggy is increasing the per capita consumption, not in terms of, say, kgs of rice used, but at least in terms of the value, it's definitely going up. So either through a process of distribution, which is what retail would be, either bricks and mortar or the e-commerce retail, through a process of distribution, through the process of innovation. What are the sort of innovative products that we are coming? And we have seen a lot of this happen in the e-commerce sector. I think we need much more in the traditional retail. I know Nagesh is a great fan of traditional retail and I fully support that. So maybe you should but which contributes to 80 or 85% of our retail. What are the innovations that are coming over there to build up consumption? Maybe I can just leave it at that to pick it up. So
he's thrown it to you.
Yeah, I think I see retail as a social place. And we also have to understand that what's happening in the Western world is, people are using robotics and artificial intelligence, machine intelligence to shop, which means nobody is in between, and going to spiritual gurus to come out of all their depressions in life. So we have to understand that we are social beings, and retail has been a place for social. And Kishore very clearly says it's a temple where all of us go. So it's important for us to understand the role of the employee. And I have hard fact, because the trust that I run actually works for the betterment of the employees. A 3-month-old employee, a 6-month-old employee, and a 1-year-old employee, the productivity difference is 28% between the 1 year and the 3 months. Okay, and people are talking all about attrition. Okay, very few people talk of retention. So to me, people are very, very important in this business. We are forgetting that retail doesn't have people, but Swiggy has 60,000 people, adding 150,000 people. They'll have 300,000 people.
Absolutely.
Okay, but a Kirana guy comes in, you open the door and take this. A Swiggy guy comes in, how many times you open the door and bring him in? These are things which are going away. To me, is there a way, and especially if you look at the cost of an Indian employee in the retail, and I'm talking of India because I think the audience is interested here in India. I think the cost and the productivity and plus intelligence added on top to it, you can make this as a fantastic opportunity. Yeah, Damodar is involved in a book called Be a Supermarket Wala. We are working together with him. To me, Kirana, when he gets modernized, from a mom pop and 1% 3, it goes to between 5 and 7. The productivity goes up. So there is a role of people, and I think India has a huge opportunity to actually create large amount of jobs in retail, because retail also brings in societal changes, I think, which we have to accept. I was telling Shailesh that, look at shops. How many people bust the queue in a cash counter? Very rarely. My grandmother used to wear her nightie and go to shop for dhania and nimbu. Okay, my wife and daughters will put a MAC lipstick before they go into a shop. These are changes that are happening, and these are changes which are very positive for for the country. So I'm a very big supporter that use all the intelligence, but see if the intelligence can actually work along with people, because the cost of people in this country is not very, very great. So therefore, you can create an experience which is unbeatable.
Absolutely.
I can definitely tell you, you put the same amount of capital money that you put in the robo, which is Mitra, okay, must be a $100,000, $50,000, $25,000.
Easily.
You give me $5,000. I will train a person to be giving you deliver a better experience than Mitra.
Absolutely.
Okay, to me, we are forgetting that capital put into people can be huge opportunity in a country like ours. And that's my belief, and I would continuously support this.
Absolutely. Damodar, what's your view? Are you
Expe-
middle of the road or
No,
are you
ex-
one way?
no. Experiences are always, the richest of experiences are always multisensorial. And multisensorial experiences are best delivered through people. And as Nagesh said, if I back people with intelligence, so it's human at the front end and intelligent empowering, then at the smallest of scale, at the scale of one traditional kirana store, you can create delight, which let me say it in
That's
this
a
group,
brilliant
which
insight.
none of us
Brilliant.
large retailers with all the technology can do it, because the neighborhood store already has the social capital.
Absolutely.
We're talking about familiar, informing people. I think if you go to the neighborhood kirana store and you say, this household needs chili powder, that chili powder has to be organic and has to be delivered only after 5 o'clock in the evening, because the grandmother would be sleeping until then, is the intelligence that is embedded there.
Brilliant.
If you just back it so that this intelligence is not dependent on one human being or two, but is backed by the power of democratized data and processing, then we create a powerhouse which is very, very different. So you don't have to replace current mechanisms of delivery of service to provide delight. In fact, you can build on it and turn it into a strength with which to do that.
I think the key.
I just want to
Sorry,
add something
please.
to this, again, because all of us are probably interested in retail, as to how we are disempowering the whole value chain through empowered intelligence. Okay, a consumer is coming with his or her mobile phone into the shop. She knows about what happened a second before.
Absolutely.
Okay, at least of what I know, 90% of retailers don't allow their employees to carry their mobile phone inside the store. So which means that the intelligence that the employee will have, if it's a very, very good company, will be up to morning 9 o'clock. Okay, if it is other, you are dated. So you are actually disempowering. Just look at it, if you can empower, and like you said, you heard something about the podcast, just imagine if an employee can build a conversation with you, because he also has the tool with him.
Absolutely.
So that, I think, is important. We have to empower our employees in the front end with the technology that we
It's
have.
brilliant. I think the point both of you, or all three of you, are making is that you can raise both productivity and the quality of experience if you bring technology and the human being. So it is ESG, all three together. It is your environmental stewardship, your social responsibility, which is jobs, and your governance of the whole process. And governance, even in a highly IT-enabled process, is going to be at the edge, because you just need to make sure that the edges don't fray. And I think that's really the notion that we should all hold when we're trying to deliver massive value from retail. The other issue that comes up at all times in retail is, how do you actually manage your profits? Because your profits can simply go away if you have taken wrong decisions in what to procure. And so how does it happen in a retail scenario? How do you kill the bugbear of unsold inventory and still continue to deliver profits? So
Again, see, obviously what's happening is that from the procurement side, each of these large retailers, and while we don't deal with the grocery, we do deal with Reliance Retail, the trends. For example, every season they would want the price reduced and reduced and reduced. So as a manufacturer, you're getting squeezed out over there. At the other end is the consumer, who is now getting so many options at lower prices for similar goods or same goods that you are now completely squeezed out. So where the, I mean, the trick I feel in future is going to happen is going to be a lot on, let's say, your management of your knowledge and what's going to happen in the future to, let's say, make sure that the inventory that you're building up is valuable and is not, going to go down the drain. Now, this is only going to happen if I mean, the other session which is happening on artificial intelligence is both artificial intelligence and retail tie together in terms of the amount of data analysis that is done on past and predictive. I think largely it's on predictive. That's going to be the key in the future. See, why is there so much of hype which is going on AI? I think the single important reason is that the amount of data that is now being generated in the world is phenomenal. Every year, the amount of data is getting doubled. And the more the data and the more powerful the machines are, the more better your predictive and forecast accuracies are going to be. So the early adopters in this particular field and would definitely benefit in terms of improving the profitability, because the areas where you're going to improve profitability are getting squeezed. I mean, the traditional routes are all expanded. I mean, they've gone. Absolutely. I mean, you cut down on cost, procurement, selling prices. Selling prices, so forget it. It's not going to happen at all. So you will have to get into a lot more modern techniques to make sure that you are above everyone else. Brilliant. I mean, that's my.
There is a big challenge, Shailesh. When you talk of profitability, the cost of intelligence is so much, it can never deliver profits. You please tell me how many intelligent companies with technologies in the world are as profitable as the so-called non-intelligent brick and mortar are in the world. Let's take names. You will not find 5 of them who are making profits. So look at this, what's happening. An Indian consumer, he mentioned about per capita. If your per capita is $2,000 and you spend is $1,100, okay? $1,100 means how much are you spending per month? $100, okay? $100 and the total consumption of an Indian household is 1,200 SKUs. In the city, in rural, it is 180 SKUs. Please tell me, do you require artificial intelligence to say 180 is dal, chawal, namak, ghee, kitna consume karega? The cost is too much. It just cannot work. So for us, and this is the big problem that we are creating in India, okay? Look at what's happening to companies. How many of you here in this audience are more than $100 million retail company? More than 700 crores? I just want to answer this question because I'm coming to a particular point as to what it is. So what's happening is, Shailesh, I think it's important for the current Indian retailers to understand what kind of business we are in. We are all concentrating too much on the 5% business, which is not happening. Globally, also in America, 13%, 14% is the so-called intelligence-led retail. If you look at Amazon, putting together is not more than 13, 15%. So we have to talk about saying what can we do to improve our 90% of the business. Correct. If I'm a retailer, okay, but adopt the intelligence. If I am a retailer as a country, what can we do to help the 85% of the traditional retailers who are still contributing? Let's not forget, even Lever is what, 20% is modern? 80% still dependent on traditional retail. So I am a firm believer of this whole intelligence, machine intelligence, but the application somewhere, there is a problem.
So actually,
where we are applying it and how we are making it productive.
So that's exactly as Damodar mentioned, which is you're using the back-end intelligence to these guys. How do you deliver it to that 80-85% of the people? I mean, that's.
Damodar, what's your sense? Because you are a great believer in technology, and maybe the combination of geo and retail is going to drive change.
So I think technology is a given, and technology for markets like ours provides a shortcut. You don't have to travel the entire path of evolution that the rest of the world did. It provides a shortcut for us to be global, efficient and global scale. That's a given. But for efficiency, the way it is measured in terms of overhang of stocks, etc., I think that is not a competitive edge. Those technologies are available to all of us across the world, anyone coming from India or anyone coming from world, that's fine. I think the key thing in this phase that all of us have to concentrate on is if we channelize our energies to get a 20% like-for-like growth in the discovering the upside because of the intelligence, discovering building the experience, predicting the demand ahead of the curve. If you're growing at 20-25% in the same store, your same stock will become easier and easier in terms of days on hand that you are holding. I think we create value because we increase choice for the customer and we sell more, and not by the 5% that you meant, squeezing the 5%, that there all of us will be similarly poised.
And if there's a way we can use the technology to make this a more inclusive business, I think then you have a powerful, I mean, if we as Indians are able to create an inclusive business with technology, in bringing all the ecosystem, I can tell you that nobody can touch us. The power will be with us as a country, because where else do you have one store for every 100 population anywhere in the world? We have 10, 12 million kiranas for a 1.3 billion population.
I
mean,
love the
we are
way,
powerhouse.
Nagesh, you are expressing your heart in the Kirana Wala, because I believe that's the community which needs the service.
No, not only kirana, I'm saying look at all trades which can be powered by technology.
Absolutely. And I don't think anybody is arguing against technology. Everybody is arguing for relevant, embedded technology which will create that experience at the lowest cost.
Experience
And with lowest capital
experience
infusion
for the customer,
for the customer.
but profitability for the whole value chain.
Absolutely.
I think that is very important.
So then how do you then account for the price dimension? So how do we get to affordable luxury, available when people want it and available when the choice arises in the mind of the person? So, Damodar?
So the key difference compared to how technology came to retail in the previous generation and now is digital technology is very, very democratized. It doesn't need scale. You needed the smaller retailers to vanish or come under the umbrella of bigger retailers because scale provided access to technology. Now it does not. I could be running a 1,000 square feet store and I will have as much processing power and intelligence access that a large retailer would have. And I already have the social technology which comes from proximity. So this is going to be very, very different.
So are you defining digital as mobile only?
Digital is mobile first.
Okay, all right.
Because for the customer it's mobile first, for the provider also it's mobile first and things around mobile. And we always say, Nagesh touched upon that every customer, we internally in our teams, we say that the definition of customer now is a human being and a smartphone always together. Yeah, you may miss your child, you may lose your spouse somewhere, but you'll never lose your phone. And if a human and a smartphone is together, it means the customer is coming into my store with a scanning, imaging, communication, location tracking, and processing power, which is equivalent to what my entire store had 5 years back.
So can
the
one of you,
possibilities with that
can
is,
one of you create a retail experience in 2025? And maybe Nagesh, you can do that for us. How will this actually work out, what Damodar just said? A customer walks into a retail space in 2025. What will happen?
No,
What will be the experience?
I think I would change the statement. The real experience will not be when customer walks into the retail space.
Okay. So let's forget walking into anywhere.
Let's forget walking into
Let's
the
say
retail
that the customer creates a demand.
I'm saying the customer requires something and she or he will make a choice at what moment, at what place she wants.
Absolutely.
Okay, and what the retailer is likely to do is he or she will be delivered from a physical location or from a partner location, collaborative location. And this could be anywhere in the world. And that's what is likely to happen. I mean, I was just talking to somebody in Selfridges and I said, how many stores are you opening? He's saying, we don't want to open any more stores.
Any more stores.
Okay, because we are able to deliver what we need around the world at a much lower cost with less capital. So there is a possibility. I mean, tomorrow Central could have a tie-up with Selfridges and Damodar wants to buy a watch which is not here.
Yeah.
I mean, you could still cater to Damodar, then take the accountability and responsibility of delivering, getting it to Selfridges. It's possible. I think that's where the thing. But what will be different here will be that experience of delivering the watch. Okay, so if you are taking the experience of taking it at a Selfridges store, You should be able to deliver the watch to Damodar's house like that, which means the person who will be coming will not be a delivery boy branded, but will be wearing a self-produced dress and enter with him, bring in the wrapper, show him all that experience. That's where the human element will come.
So that brings me to another very interesting, fascinating thing which I'm seeing. You know, if you look at the advertising on IPL, I was watching it the whole day yesterday. So for the first time, I saw that rather than manufacturing, a large part of the eyeballs are taken up by service.
Yeah.
So you had an urban clap, advertising on IPL, which was for the first time that I saw that kind of commitment to service advertising. Now, how will service be vended in a retail format or in a retail way? The biggest problem I have in my home is to keep every device working at all times. And to get hold of a plumber or to get hold of a electrician or a carpenter is such a struggle. So where is retail and services going? And let's keep in mind that we are 62% of GDP coming from service. So
I just want to add I think if you're talking of 5 or 10 years, let's also talk of that customer.
yeah,
My belief is this customer is changing very differently.
yeah.
Okay, you may have a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom house, 2 cars, 3 cars. Your children may not even have a house or a car because they'll go and live in an apartment of their choice, and plumbing over, so they'll move to another apartment. Let the landlord
I love that.
work about it.
So low cost housing.
Yeah. Second is, if you really look at and study, I mean, let's not get into this circle of customers, but look at the middle segment.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that.
They are fashionable, but their wardrobe is not full of $100 garments. It's $5, $10, they know what to buy. If you go into nature and you go into the Indian hinterlands, the behavior of a youth coming from a Mumbai rich is very different. The average job change is 1 year. So there is no insecurity at all. So when you are dealing with an insecure customer like us, we have come from this generation, we are very different. But this customer is not insecure. They have no problems at all to leave a job, take on things. So my belief is in the next 10 to 20 to 50 years, the per capita consumption of products and material is going to come down. Okay? And per capita consumption of service and experience will go up. And the kind of premium people will pay for the experience will be substantially high than the cost of the product.
Brilliant. So how will we cater that in retail? So how will you transform your organization to cater to that need?
Well, to the kind of people that you have, because each one has to believe that the touch point is important, and touch point is no more your touch point. The touch point
Damodar,
is
what
third.
do you
Yeah.
feel? Because this is such an important issue.
I think the direction is known, the path is not known to anybody. So I won't talk about 5 or 10 years, etc. I will tell you what we are dabbling with, what we are fooling around with, what we are piloting.
That's interesting.
What we are piloting today. So we are interested in the thought of demand in the mind of the customer. Yeah, I have a purchase track of the customer. So I can guess that it is in this band. In the next 2 or 3 days, the customer would be in a mood to shop with us, and either she triggers the conversation. I'm a grocer. My customer is primarily a she.
Sure.
Either she triggers the conversation with the store, not in the physical sense, but a demand fulfillment agency. Either she triggers a conversation, or we trigger a conversation predictively, and say, I think time to replenish X, Y, or Z, and we are only interacting digitally. Yeah? To make it a little more this thing, we are only on WhatsApp with the customers. We enter each other's conversation, and she says, yes, I think this evening or this afternoon, 2 hours from now, I would be walking by the store. I would be dropping in. And this is happening. This is and it is WhatsApp. It is like that. It is how technology is all pervasive in our lives. And then the store, the personified store, says, lovely, I know you buy these 10 things most of the time. Here is a list. which one of them are you, will you want to pick up as you come to the store and travel. So she can just check the 5 things that she wants to buy. The store obviously tries to nudge a little bit. It's all artificial intelligence. There is a chatbot that is working. Nobody else is involved. There is a chatbot and the analytics that is working. And we suggest a couple of things and she says yes. And then there is an option suddenly. She can have a voice conversation with the store, or she can say, I think I'm in a hurry, just send these things home. Or she says, no, as planned earlier, I'm going to be dropping in at the store. So other 2 are obvious. The third one, when she comes into the store, there is a trolley half filled with the necessity part of her
That she
shopping.
might need.
That is customized. So that trolley is ready for Kavita.
Brilliant.
And then she starts shopping for discretionary items. I think this whole seamlessness of between what is digital,
Brilliant.
what is shopping visit, where does thought begin?
You have a challenge. Because my intelligence that time will know Kavita is buying dal, chawal, this. I will send a message, why do you want to buy this? I know you want to prepare khichdi. I'm going to send you hot khichdi home.
I've already taken.
So I mean, this is what is likely to happen, and therefore there could be some challenges which are very different.
We are Reliance. That part of the plan I'm not discussing yet.
But, you know, Raymond's, taking you back to your earlier engagement, came out with this made to order.
Yeah.
And that became the product, and the cloth became the commodity, in a sense. I mean, I'm just, Anant is here or not? I don't know. But that's the way I looked at it. Now, is that a transition that is repeatable in many different contexts?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you got to look at what is the context. I mean, this happened in the case of a cloth getting converted and giving an experience which was, I mean, out of the world. So similarly, I mean, in various other areas, we are finding that online. If you see the sort of experiences you're getting when you're shopping online in terms of suggestions of what products are coming in, actually when you're online, the person out over there or whatever it is, the store knows completely your history.
Yeah.
Complete history in terms of at an instance. In a brick and mortar store, that takes time and that takes probably human intervention to know that yes, at the traditional retail level, it happens much more because you know him personally. But whereas every instance of an online purchase, you have the whole background of the history. So that's a big advantage that they have. But coming back to, I mean, even uplifting the experiences, and we keep coming to Swiggy. I mean, Swiggy is a classic case of uplifting your experience of buying. A little earlier, you mentioned about fashion and whether that's going to. I mean, people are not spending that much on fashion items. One of the things which I think what's happening over a period of time is that where people want to spend more is changing. Now, people may not want to spend more on clothes, but they definitely want to spend more on restaurants, probably. Experiences in high-end restaurants is the way plating is done, laid out, because that's what is going, or travel. So those things will keep changing, but definitely at each level, people want to go in for a different experience. But the category where they want to go in for that experience may change from time. Maybe 10, 15 years back, it was Armani and Louis Vuitton and all. Maybe 10 years down the line, it could be something. And as Shailesh mentioned, Apple is already moving over from a manufacturing to a service orientation. Similarly, I mean, retail is all about service and needs to concentrate much more out over there.
So, some more audience participation. What do you all think about the debate? You know, Damodar talked about the future where you will know everything about Kavita. That raises the issue of privacy. So, how does the audience feel about the intersection between privacy and this personalization?
I feel that maybe after 20, 25 years, Kavita might not need to go to the mall or the store to buy.
At all.
And probably that could, you could lose the connect, the involvement between, the shopkeeper and the buyer. So probably I feel that it
You
could
know, all
work.
of us seem to be betting that that won't happen.
That won't happen because she will still pass by.
She'll still pass
She
by.
could
She'll
pass by, she
still
could
have it
pass
stayed.
by, but
Today will be 30 years older, she will require help.
Junior Kavita will pass by.
there could be a
As I said,
Mitra will be there.
No, but you need to cater to every age bracket. And let's not forget that the biggest change in humanity today is aging. Today, it is no longer necessary to assume that India's predicted life was 67 a few years ago. In 5 years' time, it may be 80, average lifespan. And in Japan, it's already touching 100. So the whole aging issue is coming in a very different way into the equation, particularly the retail
Also,
equation.
the online players are realizing that you can't complete the experience without an offline. If you look at Apple,
Absolutely.
their standalone stores,
The online
are
offline
fabulous.
transitioning.
I mean, you took example of Japan. Japan has a store in Hongqiu. It's a $2.5 billion single store.
Yep.
I mean, you're talking about 20,000 crore, one single store.
Yep.
So so I'm saying there is an important intersection. It's very difficult to slide the scale to say where the interaction
Absolutely
will be.
correct.
But I think it's all becoming visible. It's becoming visible.
But that's good, Dinesh, that you sparked that
no, where
set
do
of
we
comments.
see the kiranas going then after 25 years?
They will be, as I think Damodar mentioned, supply points. I mean, you need, suppose I want to access that Armani suit, which is not available near me. I'll have to come to that fellow who's a supply point and he will deliver it to my home. And my imagination runs a little more wild and says that there will be conduits to our home which will deliver it without the kirana boy having to come up and actually deliver it to your home. So many innovations are happening around the supply chain.
My
Also
question.
look at it in the context of the infrastructure that we have in the country today. It's very difficult. Ask him how many stores can we all put together find in existing societies of a 3,000 square feet. The traditional construction is 1,000 square feet each, so you have to go to a mall.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we are still looking at the coastal roadways to come in 5-10 years time. So I think infrastructure in the country also doesn't allow some of the innovations to seep in. So to me, an inclusive kirana in a large, like a Reliance or a people who are willing to put in large amount of capital will make a huge difference. Many of your
Huge
7-Elevens could be kiranas
That's what
tomorrow
it is.
converting
That's-
into franchise.
That's our thought.
So if you look
And,
at the Easy Day thought, all the large corporates are thinking
the
to make
easy
it
day
inclusive.
thought is exactly that.
Yeah.
The thing is that now people are just making a list and giving it to the house help and they're going and purchasing. I don't know how many people actually go and purchase dal chawal. I mean, they ask somebody in the house to go and purchase it. So the kirana already knows the servants of every household and they give whatever.
You're talking of the just 0.25% of this population. It is not
And my
true.
question is to Raymond. You all are too men-oriented with suitings and all, and also the men cosmetics and men perfumes and sprays and all. You could have had a female because she comes and just sits with her man while he's trying out
No,
the suits.
I left Raymond 4 years
Yeah,
back.
so
I can-
he cannot be
I can-
answerable.
As an observer, actually Raymond made a lot of efforts to getting to the women. But see, Raymond's core strength is actually more, the core strength is fabric, which is very, very male oriented. So, and the whole organization is
The whole
male
DNA
oriented.
is,
But I must tell you, in 2000, and I think the organization had that vision. We launched a designer wear brand called B. I think
And suddenly it disappeared.
absolutely. I mean, I personally feel if we had just stayed put with that. Sometimes large organizations of those size don't have the patience for for smaller things. It was definitely much ahead of its time. But the way that it was growing before I think the plug finally got pulled out, I'm pretty sure it would have done fantastically well because the brands which were launched around that time, women's wear brands around that time, which is and W, you look at the valuations of those brands right now. So it was just a matter of being there, being patient.
Even the personal products like Park Avenue, etc., were only male-oriented, while the women were accompanying the men to the shops. And while
Big
they were getting
missed
measured and
opportunity.
everything, they were just sitting there. I mean, you
Yeah.
They
You're
had
right.
something going for them.
Pramod bhai, we've covered your digitization and pricing points, but
One point, sir, about
Yeah.
purchasing power of the lower class and the middle class, how they can afford all the big stores, which are having a very high price tag, sir.
they just talked about it, but we can have another go at it if you like, the purchasing
One
power.
line, sir.
Yeah. So I think modernizing distribution and aggregating demand automatically leads to taking out inefficiencies from the value chain, which in a free supply market will get passed on to consumers. So uh, it's not out. We didn't set out to do it, but when we do the calculations, we know that in the last year, in our grocery stores, we delivered a minus 2.8% inflation to our customers. So,
brilliant.
so the
That's brilliant.
it is more a marketing problem that in perception terms, when people see big stores and modern stores, they intuitively think that these are got to be expensive in their prices. That's a marketing problem for us to, all of us collectively to address. But affordability is natural to higher competition and more people actually competing to serve the customer.
But that triggers another thought in my mind. When is the world going to actually turn massively in the direction of C2C, co-creation, direct to customer, customer creating the product or the service? And when will that get, in a capital light way, get mass availability? Do you all have any point of view?
I personally feel that that may not happen, my opinion, because I think the way the generations are growing, they will co-create things which are more intangible and not product. There will be knowledge co-creation, there will be co-creation of experiences, but not necessarily product co-creation, because you can co-create at the ideation level, but to bring into production and make it into a real product, the way things are, unless the 3D printer becomes such that I can print a shirt
Exactly.
and print a shirt at a cost-effective way.
Right.
And cost-effective way is no more ROCE, it is ROTI,
Absolutely.
return on time invested.
Yep.
And the future generation's time is much more valuable, because when they while away time, it is valuable time. So it's a very, very
Any
different.
contrarian point of view?
You're talking about in a capital light way.
Yeah.
In fact, both with Indian farming and Indian retail, the problem is it is too capital light. It's also its advantage that it is so frugal and the operating costs are so low because these are very, very light organization. I don't think we should be chasing capital light. The world learns frugal running of organizations from us. We need more capital formation in retail, which is what we spoke about with modernizing of the kirana.
Brilliant.
Both physical and digital modernization. You need more capital formation to back it, exactly the way we need more capital
So
formation in
what will
agriculture.
attract capital to retail in your minds? What attracts capital to retail? Why has Amazon become the darling? Is it because they cater to the entire human race, potentially? What is it because pricing power is not relevant to Amazon because the pricing power is in the hands of the guy who comes onto the platform? Or is it because, so is it ROCE, is it ROI, is it return on time? What is it that will attract capital?
You know, as management trainees in Unilever, we were asked to do the ROC and ROI of the cigarette vendor and the kirana store. That there is no problem because the capital invested is so low.
There is a huge, infinite return.
So what will attract more money, more enterprise into this is expanding consumption.
Yeah.
I think, and that story has just about begun.
Bigger.
So as people start consuming more value-added products, as consumption pie grows, automatically to service it, more capital and more enterprise and more intelligence will go into the serving sector.
You have to add a word of value-added consumption by improving lives. I think that's an important part because two things happening. When there is a deflation in your product, ultimate pressure is going to two sides. The farmer, his produce is getting lesser and lesser.
Value.
On the other hand, the valuation of the investors, which to a great extent is also artificial. I mean, just imagine a situation, to bring in a contrarian view, if there are some investors, I'm so sorry about it. If there's a bust that happens in the top 100 investment companies, like the bust that we have had earlier, all the stock that we are doing will have no value. Because at the end of the day, they have not generated returns in real terms. And the end consumers on both the sides want returns in real terms. Farmer को cash चाहिए, दुकानदार को cash चाहिए. वो cash में धंधा करता है. I mean, cash in the sense of there has to be transactions.
So is it C2C cycle which will drive investment?
I think a C2C cycle and a happy C. Currently, a happy C as a consumer is happening, but a happy C as a investor, as a citizen is not happening. So the citizen happy and the customer happy will actually has to converge.
So one of the things which, I mean, you talked about the valuation or what's driving capital investment. One of the things could be how do, I mean, either investors or consumers see what's the green space or the blue ocean ahead that a company has.
Yes.
Now, those companies which they perceive, and it's all in their perception, have a much wider green space ahead, will obviously attract more capital and more returns. And we are seeing that, you know, the, I mean, if you, all the, say the Cokes or the IBM, not so much of IBM, but the motor companies or any of those, they are now far, far lower because I don't think the investors and the consumers are seeing that the green space is as much as it is there for an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Facebook or so. That's the way that this is one thing which, I mean, you talked a little bit about privacy, and this is, in fact, I just wanted to check with my colleagues out over here. Is personalized pricing going to be a driver for demand in future? I mean, do you see that? I mean, that's a part of, I mean, it's personal to you, so it's private. So if I go to your shop, and it could be an online one also, do I get a price which you won't get because of all my back history and my trend, future predictive trends for purchasing of that product? Do you see that as a futuristic
There
thing?
was a store in Singapore which did this about 7-8 years back. Okay, the model worked for the customer, but it didn't work for them because they could not manage the supply chain to deliver that.
Yeah.
So they did two things. One is it was personalized, and secondly, it also looked at the time when you have come in, and also looked at the inventory in the supply chain.
Okay.
So they actually matched all three. So each one of us going 5 minutes different, we were actually
Get a
getting
different
different
price.
price. But the original acquisition or the COGS was defined at a time of sourcing. And this variation eventually made the
But
company
maybe
bankrupt.
with the
They
current
closed.
technologies which are there could be a driver.
But the margins are getting squeezed. You only mentioned that. So at some point with a X amount of margins, you can't deliver experience unless there is a cash being burned from a different side.
Correct, but maybe I mean, for example, onions might be say 15 rupees a kg, but I might be prepared to pay 25 rupees. I am a consumer who doesn't mind. So,
But
would
isn't that what is somewhat happening today when you shop online? You know, the price from Amazon
Yeah.
of the same product
Yeah.
to different people at different times is entirely different. It's not the same. So it
So
is
is that,
personalized.
yeah, correct, you're right. So is
pricing.
that going to be a trend in the future moving forward?
I mean, who knows?
I'll tell you the consumer need in this phase. The traditional trade system actually did this brilliantly all the time. The Lalaji knew who is from which family the order is coming, and the pricing was discretionary at the end. I think what the customer actually wants is democratization, transparency. I think we are in that phase of, for a very, very long time, the haves and people with power have had the trade serving them in a discriminatory positive manner. People want self-service is actually, with fixed prices is actually a complete antithesis of that. In this phase, the customer wants, whether I go, whether I send my help, or whether my grandfather goes, who is a big industrialist, the pricing is the same. That whole democratic kick from the trade is what people are enjoying right now.
And also privacy, because there's a need to include, okay, we are giving access to privacy and then questioning privacy.
But you know, the other side of the coin of privacy is access and is your permissioning. So permissioning and access are the other side of the coin. And if there's an implicit permissioning, then privacy is not an issue. and therefore that's the way the world is likely to go. So we have now 6 more minutes, and here's how I propose to spend them. We'll get feedback on the session of 1 minute each from 3 individuals. I don't want to pick them, but I'm tempted to request Vedika to give a 1 minute feedback, and then we'll go to 2 others. Maybe you can give a feedback and ask your question. Vedika? And then we'll get Mr. Damodar Mal, who ceded his time to the panel discussion to summarize all the great thoughts that we've come up with. Is that okay? Mic here, please.
I think as a young consumer, like, somebody who shops online as well as offline, like one thing which always personally for me drives the online experience is convenience, but at the same time offline it's the experience of going to a store, and there are a lot of things which you can't do offline. So personally I think my view is that while we do talk about technology and how it's going to make brick and mortar obsolete, I don't feel that's going to come soon, because especially there's going to be a whole generation who's grown up with that, and it's going to continue. Like even today, it's not like everybody's got rid of a landline. Like everyone said, when the cell phone comes in, landlines are immediately going to die out. It took a long time, and there's still, like, there's a section of the population which is aging, which is still so used to it. So I think India, given the kind of audience we have, the kind of various categories of age population that we have, and I say it's not just about a demographic dividend. One day we're also going to grow old. So I think you can't really remove that human experience, as you said, from retail.
Somebody from outside India who's in the audience, would you please give us some feedback? Would you?
Okay, I'm from Taiwan. Okay, I'm the chairperson of the Taiwan Chamber of Commerce.
Wonderful.
Today I particularly come here for the retail because most of the Taiwanese are interested in retail.
Right.
Yeah, so about today's topic, before coming only I've seen, because I'm from Taiwan, so all our lifestyle is much ahead of India. Which is happening now is what happened when I was small in Taiwan. So I've seen the change, the revolution of the lifestyle. Like even now, I've heard the 7-Eleven is coming to India.
Yes.
Or this IKEA also has come. Which before just when I married that time, I was telling my husband, this is going to come to India soon. So which is just, and Starbucks as well. Actually, I'm in India, in Bombay already more than, considered 15 years. When I come that time, there's not, you can say hardly any coffee shop from outside. So before I married to India 15 years back, it was already Starbucks everywhere. So when I come that time, I was just waiting for Starbucks to come. So finally, I waited and Starbucks has come. So as per I seen about this also online, Taiwan also is already very popular. Of course, I think now the stage is similar to Taiwan that time. Starting, it takes some time, but I believe it's going to be eventually getting popular here.
Wonderful.
Because of the generation is getting exposed to all technologies, right. And for particularly for the middle class, the more people are starting to work in a company, there'll be more about a habit, purchasing habit. They would like to just order in the office when they're free, which is helping them to purchase easily.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Somebody who has spent a lot of time in retail, Anand, would you like to give us some feedback? I mean, you were not there for the whole session. But
Yeah, sorry, I had to attend the AI session because
cool.
I was asked to do some niceties there. I think very interesting talk, whatever I heard about it. Thank you. I just wanted to ask maybe one question also. One of the panelists said that privacy is an opt-in, but quite often we don't know. And there are all these ads and all. I've actually seen a lot of targeted pricing coming to me on let's say online, ticket booking, and he would get a different price, I get a different price. I'm quite happy with it, but sometimes we need to decide what we want from privacy.
Right. Yeah.
Also, I was wondering whether the dark web and some of the technologies out there, how is that going to change, how people look at retail? So maybe feedback from there.
When Mr. Damodar Mal summarizes, he may. Yes, you had a question or an input to give, so.
Actually, so hi, my name is Udit Sanghai. I own a brand and it's mostly grocery products. I'm actually a vendor on our grocery as well. So we are discussing about 2025, and I think we're talking about retailers, we're talking about kirana walas, we're talking about service to consumers. What I want to understand is that, say in 2025, how will be the service be to consumers in the rural markets? You know, we've mostly, I think we've spoken about Armani jackets and stuff like that out here in the metro cities, but what will be the service to the consumers in the rural markets?
Good, great idea. So, over to you to summarize, give some key highlights, and then rely to some of the questions.
No, I think we started with the primary deliverable for the sector is always the experience, whether in the traditional way, whether it's in the modernized way, and everything amounts to delivering the demand fulfillment experience to the customer. I think the unique thing is, as technology becomes mainstream, as it becomes part of everything that we do, the unique thing that will happen in India is the traditional service providers, which is the entrepreneur retailers, will remain and will get modernized in ways that we don't know fully yet, but will remain an important part of the value chain which delivers. So probably in this phase in which increase in consumption and democratization of technology happens together, we will see models of delivery of service and models of customization appear very, very different from what one has seen so far. So all of us took a shot at which way, what parts of retail and service delivery will shape, and how will it impact lives of people who are servicing people. How will it impact the jobs that the sector creates, and how will it impact the lives of customers, service providers, which is the teams that we all employ, going up to other members of the value chain that we participate in. So interesting times looking forward, but no definite black and white kind of answers. So I think we've all been truthful in that sense.
Brilliant. Lovely, Damodar. Thank you very much. We then bring the session to a close, and whatever formalities IMC wishes to.
Thank you very much. What a great opening to our India Calling session on retail. This was absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure each one of you present here will agree. Let us give a very big round of applause to our chairman of the session and our eminent panelists. We would like to express our gratitude to our distinguished panelists. May I request Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, chairman of the session, to felicitate Mr. Damodar Mal with a token of appreciation. Now to Mr. B. Sorry. Now Mr. Haribhakti to Mr. B.S. Nagesh. Mr. Aniruddha Deshmukh. Of course, and how can I forget to felicitate and thank our own Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. May I invite Mr. Manoj Patodia, who is the chairman of IMC's Core Committee on Manufacturing Sector, to felicitate Shailesh Bhai. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we shall be now taking a break for lunch, and I would request all of you to assemble here at 2:30 p.m. for further discussions. Thank you. Dignitaries to please come on the dais. Mr. Mark Fernandez, Chairman of the session. Mr. Vivek Chori, Chief Commissioner of Customs. Sir, a very warm welcome to you. Mr. Shashi Kiran Shetty. Mr. Abhik Mitra and Mr. Julian Bivis.
Good afternoon. Now we've got to get moving. Topic is logistics in retail. Sorry, ship came 5 minutes late, but we'll make sure to make up time. Indian Merchant Chamber is proud to hold this India Calling under my chairman, Rajiv Podarji, and the president, Mr. Raj Nair, and the team. With us this afternoon, we have the who's who in the industry of logistics, in the industry of clearance, warehousing, shipping, courier. Since I've got only 40 minutes left, I would like to invite Julian Bevis, the Executive Director of AP Moller and Merck in India, whom I know for more 22 years, he said today, and who has been the pivotal person in making things happen in India much smoother. There used to be a lot of conflicts earlier with shipping lines, the exporters, importers, but Julian, being here for 22 years, has smoothened the rough waves, and now we have a smooth sailing. Next, I will request Abhik Mitra, who is from Spot On, who is diverse in his knowledge from courier to investment. Courier plays a big role today because everybody is buying their stuff on the phone. Amazon, Flipkart, Big Bazaar. Nobody's going to the markets anymore, or less percentage. So he's going to address on the courier. Shashi Kiran Shetty needs no introduction. Actually, it's a Guinness Book of Record that IMC has been able to have his presence here. He rarely goes to speak, maybe never speaks at a forum. Shashi and I, maybe going 35 years friendship, he covers every aspect, from shipping to warehousing to logistics. And as he said it the other day, the Uber concept was coined by him 25 years ago. I took it out from you. So he does everything door to door. And it's what actually the trade also wants: one service provider, one accountability. Last but not the least, the most cool bureaucrat from the custom department who everybody hates. People say custom this, custom that. But believe me, I know Sir, Principal Chief Commissioner, Mr. Vivek Johri, for maybe 3 decades. He has been everywhere. His last assignment was in Geneva in the WCO. He just come back, man with thorough knowledge, not artificial knowledge, but real book knowledge. We talk of artificial intelligence nowadays, sir. Here is a gentleman who's been with us today, and I'm grateful for all of you all for being here. He's going to enlighten us, the industry, as to what the government is doing and what the government has done to reduce transaction cost, to simplify movement of cargo. And he has a grouse against us as the industry, that why do you not use what they are giving us? So with this, I leave the floor now to Julian Bevis. He will speak, then Mr. Mitra, then Shashi, then last but not the least, Mr. Vivek Johri, and thereafter we'll have the question asked. I hope it's okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. After an introduction like that, it's very difficult to know quite what to say, because I think Mark is being over-generous in his comments about the time that I've spent in this wonderful part of the world. It's certainly true that I've spent 22 years on and off in India, and what fun it's been. And what a contrast too, because when I look back to what was going on in logistics when I first arrived here, there was no question that logistics was certainly something that most policymakers didn't understand at all. I think it goes so far as to say that most policymakers could not spell the word logistics, let alone know what it really meant. And that's changed completely. And the fact that there is so senior a customs official here this afternoon, I think is eloquent testimony to the quality of the change. It's also true, as Mark said, that, how can one put it, some of the transactions that went on then were rather more adversarial than they are now. And I wouldn't certainly claim any responsibility for having smoothed that out, but it is true that the industry as a whole has got its act together. So, first of all, good afternoon again, and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to allow me to speak this afternoon. It's a great privilege. It's also great privilege to be back in this town, which I regard as home, having lived here on and off for about 12 years, and this is where my children grew up. So I always feel very much at home coming here. Before I get into one or two specific points about opportunities and challenges, and there are an awful lot of challenges still, and I think we have to be realistic and face up to those challenges. There are four sort of general points that I'd like to make about what's going on in the logistics area right now. Firstly, as I said, there are a lot of challenges. There's a tremendous amount have been done since I first came to India, but we still have lots of issues that we face. I use the word we advisedly because I think we have to really take on board that this is a joint responsibility to deal with them. It's not something that government has to deal with, or he has to deal with, or they have to deal with. It's all of us. And I think there is still a lot of improvement that needs to be brought about by government and the industry working together. And I think the industry itself has to get its act together and speak where it sensibly can with a more effective, unified voice than we do at the moment. It's much better than it was, but we still got a long way to go. The second general point I'd make is that I think a lot of people in industry really need to heed the sort of wake-up calls coming from government about the need to digitize what we're doing. There are lots of people in this country pushing the boundaries in this area very hard, and that's great, but equally there are an awful lot of laggards. And between all of us, we need to push it along. And that means that we need to get things like port user community systems really working, and working in the way that they do in other parts of the world. We need to compete. It's a ferociously competitive world now, and this is very much part of it. The third general point I'd make, and Mark will, I'm sure, echo this sentiment, between all of us, we need to be a lot more transparent than we are now. And I think digitization will help that, and I think it will reduce the proliferation of intermediary processes which we see in logistics right now. The last general point I'd make is something that, again, between all of us, we must not lose sight of, is that we remain very expensive. It is an oft-quoted statistic that logistics represents something of the order of 15% of India's GDP. Now, whether it's 14 or 16 doesn't really matter. What does matter is the fact that our competitors are getting on for half that number, which is a huge disparity. And between us, as I keep saying, we need to do something about it. So let's look at a few opportunities. There are legion numbers of opportunities, but I've picked up on sort of 3 or 4. Firstly, in the warehousing arena, the warehousing and local distribution arena, since GST, which I think now is only starting to show its full benefits, we've seen quite a lot of local warehousing consolidation, which means that customers are seeing greater savings and efficiencies, and therefore there are opportunities for service providers in managing large storage spaces with IT value add as an integral part of it. Secondly, it's now very clear that warehousing and local distribution is being seen as much more of a technical, complicated arena than previously was the case. We're seeing the emergence of large-scale providers who are capable of delivering not only the physical space, but also the IT-driven warehousing management systems to support them. I think the third point I'd make is that I think India has a unique advantage in terms of its local IT entrepreneurship. We've seen a tremendous spurt in warehousing system, landside services, supported by systems which provide visibility, inventory management, and last mile visibility, and indeed first mile visibility. It's no more, or at least it shouldn't be any longer, be a paper process. The emergence of a startup market of huge energy in this country is really extraordinary. As Maersk were involved in this, we have an organization called Maersk Ocean Pro, where we are encouraging startups in Bangalore, and hopefully that is going to bring considerable benefits. The last area I'd highlight as a significant opportunity is the boom in e-commerce, which is giving rise to considerable opportunities in, again, obviously in logistics and warehousing, in last mile and first mile picks, supported by IT platforms, all integrated together. And some of the challenges, firstly, in the tier 1 cities, there's no question the physical infrastructure is improving quite quickly, but beyond that, we're still seeing an awful lot of reliance on the old warehouse go-down sort of model. The second point I'd make is that, and this is a very complicated policy area, which between us we have to think about, there's far, far too much being carried by road, and that share is positively increasing. For my money, I think we have to think about how we regulate rail prices. I know that's not a popular thing if you happen to be in Indian Railways or Concor, but I do think it's something that we're going to have to face up to. Also, some of the regulation in the road transport market also we're going to have to think about, because the proliferation of trucking facilities isn't great for our carbon footprint. We need to do more in the waterway and coastal arena. We need to integrate them. There's far, far too much freight being moved by other means. If you look at comparable economies, much more could be done. And again, we need a joint effort to deal with this. And two other quick points. In much of inland logistics, we're seeing that the working capital mechanisms which one sees in other parts of the world don't work so well, particularly as you go further down the scale in local distribution. An awful lot of it still is being handled in cash, which means that the reach of e-commerce and other similar tools is not as great as it should be. Last 2 points, and then I'll shut up. We still need to take on board, and policymakers need to take on board, that infrastructure is about physical infrastructure, obviously, but it's also about the regulatory infrastructure. You can build railway lines and roads and cranes and quays, but if the regulatory infrastructure is not up to it, then you will not get the best out of it. Which in turn leads to my closing point, and that is this subject must remain very high on the national agenda, and therefore it behoves all of us as industry practitioners to keep in close touch with government, to make sure that we articulate clearly what the issues are, so that logistics remains at the top of the list as policymakers' agendas. It's a daunting laundry list of things for people to deal with. But I have no doubt whatsoever this country will rise to the challenge, as I've said. I had the privilege of living here on and off for 22 years. During that time, and thanks to some of the people in this room now, there's been tremendous and positive change. And I have no doubt whatsoever that that change will continue, will speed up, and will be something that will continue to propel the economy to further success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. May I now request Amit Mitra to enlighten us on his views. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have the slides on that I sent across? Or?
No, I didn't see any TV.
Okay, if not, I can just sort of...
Yeah, it's there.
It's there? Okay.
We'll get it there.
Okay.
Spot on.
Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank IMC for inviting me to speak to all of you and getting an opportunity to share my views. I am slightly unwell and have a bad throat, so you'll have to excuse me for that. I'll try and give you a context of where my comments will come from, and my experience in the logistics space is more in the express and the courier segment. I started my life 14 years ago with TNT as the managing director of TNT in India, and had the opportunity to build out the domestic business for them. And as TNT was planning to be sold globally to UPS, and then finally it got sold to FedEx, I decided to move on and work in the private equity space, buying a business from TNT, and that's the business which is called Spot On. So it's a business that we bought from TNT in 2012. So my comments will come from that perspective and much less from the cross-border perspective that my co-speaker talked about earlier. And hence it will be much more about internal looking at the company and at customers that we deal with, as opposed to regulatory or cross-border trade. So what do we do in Spot On from a perspective of just putting a perspective? We are a day-definite B2B and also some B2C company. We believe that our focus has been on engineering, technology, and data, and I think this will be a common theme in my presentation. I think the growth drivers for the industry that I represent of express, courier, both international and domestic, I think the growth drivers have been significant. The industry typically has been growing at about 12 to 13% per annum, and they've been driven by GDP growth. Typically, the express industry grows at about 1.5 to 2 times GDP growth, depending on where the stage of the economy is. I think the manufacturing growth, Make in India, the SME growth have all been extremely useful. If we look at the logistics infrastructure from where we come from, GST implementation's been a boon in many ways, and I'll talk about why. The e-way bill implementation, with all its challenges, has also been very useful. It did create a lot of hardships initially. The road infrastructure, which again Julian mentioned earlier, has really improved. The driving speeds in India has significantly speeded up from the time I entered TNT in 2004 to where we are today. Air transport is getting its due across the secondary airports of India. And I think as industry, the logistics industry has become more mature, we've seen a lot more funding come into this industry, whether it's the unicorns getting created in the forms of private equity coming into Rivigo, delivery, or even into companies like us. There is a new ecosystem which has been funded by private equity which didn't exist earlier. Earlier we had either Indian promoter-driven companies or multinational companies, and I think there's a third breed which Spot On, Rivigo, delivery all represent. And of course, the e-retail segment, which again was talked about, internet and smartphone penetration, lifestyle, and again, funding for the likes of these companies. I won't drill much this particular slide. I think I've talked about it. The infrastructure status for logistics industry, I think, clearly puts center stage the government's view on why this is important, how that 14 or 15% needs to be brought down, and its impact on the Make in India strategy. the enhancement of air transport. The road infrastructure continues to happen, and GST and e-way bill have been very positive. There are clearly shifting trends in the e-retail industry. A lot of purchases happening in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Technology has been one of the biggest differentiators in that industry as opposed to the age-old Indian express industry. Far more movement from air to surface because of the cost differentials. Deliveries much more customer-centric than before, and alternate delivery mechanisms. Kirana stores being used to deliver as opposed to delivering at home, delivering in offices, etc. So a lot of things which are customer-driven are coming through. The type of customers I refer to in this slide are much more the B2B customers and also B2C customers, where for the first time in my 15-year journey over the last 3-4 years, one is seeing customers asking for much higher levels of technology from their perspective of control and visibility. Technology integration with logistics service providers, which hitherto was something which was not considered, is now almost hygiene, and if not done, affects our ability to serve them and their ability to drive service from us. Clearly, in the 3PL industry, we are seeing far higher levels of outsourcing post-GST as the warehousing footprint of India is shrinking from an average of 30 to around 18 to 20. And clearly, another point that I think was mentioned in an earlier session, service provider consolidation, where customers are saying, I don't want to deal with so many logistics service providers. I want fewer to do better work for me and more. I think the challenges in the industry that I come from is that the infrastructure, while there's been significant improvements, particularly for multimodal transportation, needs improvements in terms of the handing over, taking over. I think that's a problem when we want to provide services through rail on certain corridors, which we are unable to do purely because the handover, takeover doesn't work properly. I think the challenges in many ways are far more internal than external. Many of our companies have to now become hardcore engineering, data-driven technology companies that deliver parcels as opposed to parcel delivery companies that also use technology. And I think in that way, the aspect of engineering, whether it is data engineering and data science or physical engineering, which could even move to drones and robots for handling boxes like what Amazon does in the US. And I think the other aspect that is often forgotten in such a tectonic shift as this is people management and change management. We have to still deal with old world managers being asked to do new world stuff. How do you make them make that transition? And unless you work proactively with them, collaboratively with them, this is not going to happen. I think technology for process and productivity improvement will be key, purely because customers will demand lower or equal prices and better services at the same time. And I think Indian customers have been the best at doing that for many, many years. If I look at the future of logistics very quickly, again, I'm talking express, courier, CEP, the buzzwords will be speed, cost, reliability, accuracy, transparency, automation. And none of this will come without technology, whether it's in data sciences, Internet of Things, vehicle-mounted sensors, AI, ML, RFID, etc. And in the not so long term, and I think we will not be as long as we've been in bringing in robots for physical movement of boxes, driverless vehicles, blockchains or drones. But as we speak, companies such as ourselves are deeply engaging in data sciences, IoTs for locking, AI, ML. We are using deep conditioned learning for network design, because you cannot design a network which is covering 20,000 pin codes trying to do it manually. It's just impossible to get the correct optimum answer of cost and service. And therefore, we are using what is known as deep reinforced learning to sort of get to the answer on that. And there are many other applications that can do that. So, the great news is, I think post-GST, post-e-way bill, the business has been growing. Significant shift from the unorganized sector to the organized sector. I think it's now for the organized sector to take the game to the next level using technology, engineering, data, and science. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. I think both speakers have said the benefits of GST is there and is there to grow much larger. I now request my friend Shashikaran Shetty to kindly enlighten us on how he has evolved over the past 25, 30 years and how he's going to hit the 50 year. Thanks, Shashi.
First of all, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, when Mark said that I don't speak at all, it's not true. I do, but I very selectively choose the conferences, and also that because of my busy schedule, it sometimes becomes very difficult to combine everything. So
we are blessed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for this opportunity, and thank you, IMC, for this opportunity as well. My colleagues here in the dais, Mr. Bevis is a very, very dear old friend, and Amik I'm meeting for the first time. Abhik, I'm meeting for the first time, although I heard about him and admired his achievements in the logistics sector in the last 15 odd years. And obviously, Mr. Mr. Jori obviously is a very, very respected and very honorable Chief Commissioner of Customs, and we're glad to share the stage with you, sir. I have very little to say because both the speakers earlier have covered most of the things. I don't want to be repeating it. Mark asked me to say what we do, how did we build this company. Yes, indeed, it has been a great journey, and when I started my career 35 years ago as an entrepreneur in the logistics to where it was and where it is transformational. And I had the privilege of starting multiple businesses all within the logistics sector. We do transportation by road. We own a lot of vehicles. We do the handling of large parcels like the cranes, which is used for erection of large windmills or power projects or refineries, etc. We do the power project transportation business. We are a global company as a non-vessel owning common carrier. Exactly what Express Business does, we do internationally. And we also own multiple container freight stations. And one of the new ventures, what we have started is to build warehousing space, A-grade warehouses around the country, because we had a little bit of a idea about GST is going to come one day. We obviously didn't think of retail at that time. So we acquired land in multiple places around the country. As we speak, I'm very happy to say that we're building about 6 million square feet of warehouses. These are warehouses in one location, for example, outside Bangalore, we have about 100 acres of land. We're building about 2.5 million square feet there. Outside Delhi, we're building about similar capacity, large format in Hyderabad and in JNPT. That's the current what business that we recently got into. The other thing, obviously, we also do is the 3PL supply chain management for e-com players and for large manufacturing companies. I share completely with what Abhik has said about the growth of the 3PL industry and the express industry in the days to come is a sustainable growth that we all expect to continue. Obviously, adoption of technology and change management are going to be the key things. And logistics has been an industry has not been attracting great amount of talent because of the challenges and because of the so-called fragmented industry. I think the image of the industry has changed tremendously, and the government has recognized it because they've given the infrastructure status, and also a lot of private equity funds have been pouring into the logistic industry. Of course, many of them are not done very well, but the fact of the matter is the private equity looks at this industry is a sustainably growing industry in the years to come. So talent, I think, is a big challenge, which I think we all as industry leaders need to address to bring high quality talent into the industry. We did have obviously talent by entrepreneurs. Mostly there are probably this is one of the industry where there's the highest number of entrepreneurs, small and medium entrepreneurs like Mark and me in the initial days, and obviously there are many more that found it later on. In my point of view, we in the country, we all know that one of the biggest challenges is still about the infrastructure. I think the road infrastructure is improving tremendously, but we don't see such major improvement happening in the rail sector. Rail is still a big bottleneck. I think the DFC might change the challenges to some extent, but I think that is going to be one of the still area where I think the government can only do anything about it, because private investment in rail is going to be very difficult in terms of building the tracks. The private operators obtained licenses when the government of India came up with this policy, but they made it so difficult. Hardly anybody really survived. Hardly anybody really made money. Container Corporation of India is sitting with over 80% of the market share. They don't allow private rail operators to come into their terminal. They are monopolizing that whole container transportation industry, and it's like an airport or a railway station. Why don't you allow it's silly to think about why you don't allow private airlines to come into an airport, right? So it's the same thing. So they build these terminals and they don't allow other players to come into the terminals, right? And they keep monopolizing, and also because of the railway, because of its size, they have a lot of land bank around the country, and they only give it to Concord. They don't come up with a public auction that this land is available. Why don't you also participate and get the competitive bid and allow private players to also come and participate in that? DFC is now thinking about it because DFC doesn't want to give everything to Concord. So let us hope that they will come and private players like us can participate in the land which the government is going to auction for development of inland container depots and the logistic parks. And I would request Mr. Johri to convey this message very strongly to the government that give us a level playing field. I mean, we are not saying Concord is not doing a good job. I think we together could do a great job. We are talking about 14% cost of logistics in the country, but we cannot fight with our hands tied behind, right? So we need to allow that policy to come in where there should be a level playing field. The third is still, something about the ports. In the country, the ports are still very congested. The documentation, the security issues still have trucks waiting outside the ports for hours and hours and hours together. That obviously adds to a lot of fuel consumption, wastage of man-hour, wastage of our resources. And this is something repeatedly has been brought into the notice of all the authorities, but there is still no solution. JNPT, for example, even today suffers a delay to get into the terminal of 3.5 or 4 hours. There are 6 gates operating, but I believe there are only 2 gates are operational. I don't understand why. So these are some of the basic things. I think if you're able to fix, there should be a lot more improvement that is possible. The other thing that I also want to say about the challenges is that the logistic park policy, the government has announced that they want to come up with some 35 logistic parks, MLPs, in the country. Fine, that is great. But when are they coming? How are they going to develop it? What is the way by which private players can participate? Because government cannot give the service what the industry standards are. Industry standards are very, very high, and it's very difficult for a government body to match the standards of the services which a private sector can offer. So if we know that these 35 logistic parks are going to come, phase 1 in such and such city, phase 2 in such and such city, and what is the level of transparency, how it is going to be auctioned, when it is going to be auctioned, if this is made very clear to the whole nation, we are very happy to see how we can participate in that. Not only us, many other players in the industry will definitely look at it and build those facilities in the national interest. And my other submission is also that when the government auction this land, they should not look at making money out of the land. That's a very narrow thinking. I think what the government should really look at is how to look at the larger picture by building these MMLPs, how we can bring the logistics cost down. If that reduces by 1 or 2 percentage points, it can add into thousands and thousands of crores into the country's competitiveness. I think that's the way the government need to look at the logistic parks. This is This is some of the things that I thought let me share with you, and I'm happy to take the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashi. It's a long-standing grievance about government never matching the private sector. And now the learned Principal Chief Commissioner, Mr. Johari, will tell you how the private sector is not matching up the government's government facilities.
Good afternoon, all of you, and I must say I'm delighted to be here because, and this is the last week of March, remember, it's a very trying time for all of us. We have targets to meet, we have things to do, we've launched a lot of new initiatives which are still unfolding. Some of them have been quite chaotic, Mark would know. But I was too tempted to come and speak directly to industry because I don't very often get the chance to do that. Somebody talked about the proliferation of intermediaries, and I think the person to ask about that is me. I'm dealing most of the time with intermediaries, unfortunately, or fortunately, and that results in a game of Chinese whispers, and there are a lot of translation losses, I find. So I thought it's always good to communicate directly with industry, and I decided to come despite the month of March and all of that. So thank you very much, IMC, and thanks, Mark, for calling me here. I'm going to talk about what we've done in customs and what is our thinking going forward. So some of the things I find actually resonate with what has already been alluded to by the previous speakers, and that's a strange coincidence because I think the thinking by and large is that government and the private sector don't think alike. But there are issues on which we need to collaborate quite strongly. And I'll come to that. I'll break up my discussion in two parts. I'm going to talk about what we've done to improve logistics, moving goods across the border from the customs perspective. So that is a regulatory environment that surrounds the movement of goods when they cross the border, whether it's for imports or exports. And the second part, since I noticed that the caption talked about warehousing, there are a lot of changes that have happened in the regulatory environment that informs warehousing for the purpose of imported goods under the customs law. And I'm not sure whether many of you are aware of that. So I thought I'll just very briefly touch upon those changes. The one good thing that has happened as far as the logistics industry is concerned with regard to the working of customs is that now customs has been assigned the one singular target to chase most aggressively, and that is release time and release cost. We've always looked upon as an agency that collects revenue, that enforces the law at the border. Well, we continue to do that, but the question that was asked a couple of years ago is how efficiently are you doing that? And if that is resulting in holdups at the border, then it's not a good way to work. And therefore, a lot of business process re-engineering went into how we work and to achieve efficiencies so that goods can move quickly across the border. And that obviously has an implication for cost also. So the singular objective we're pursuing is to reduce release time and cost. And I'm happy to share with you, I'm sure all of you know it, but there's no harm in reminding you that in the Trading Across Borders Index, which the World Bank measures each year, we jumped 66 ranks this year. And the two sites that the World Bank looks at in India to do that survey is JNCH, JNPT, that's one, and the other one is ICD Tughlakabad in Delhi, because they look at two major cities in every country. And so they looked at JNPT obviously as one of the laboratories for that survey. So at least I can claim half of the credit for getting there. Now, what is it that we are trying to do with regard to logistics and customs? The one thing is that we are definitely looking at logistics more holistically now. And when I talk about the holistic approach, we're looking at the entire life cycle of an import or export transaction. So it's not just about goods arriving at the port. It's also about who all are involved in the value chain all the way till they're actually moved out of the port area. So we're looking at the entire event cycle from the time of arrival of goods till they actually leave the port. It's also holistic because we're looking at all agencies that are there at the border. And initially there was a fair amount of confusion and chaos because the regulatory environment obviously has a large number of agencies, customs being one, and the others of course were plant quarantine, animal quarantine, health, drug controller, textiles, you name it. And each was driving its own agenda, each was sort of pulling in if not necessarily in a different direction, pulling at various speeds. And somebody had to bring all this together. And the good news also is that customs has been assigned the responsibility of being the lead agency for doing that. So we have to sort of very often bang heads together amongst these agencies and ensure that they're up to speed in releasing goods. And that's why we've set up a single window, which I'm sure all of you have heard of. Unlike many of the developed countries, and I've been at the WTO negotiating the trade facilitation agreement, one of the most difficult provisions of that agreement was the one on single window. And the two majors, and I think you can guess who I'm talking about, the two majors in this world were very, very reluctant to take it on. There were very, very elongated negotiations on that provision. And eventually it became a best endeavor thing. So they just about agreed to set up a single window as a best endeavor provision and not as a mandatory provision like many others in the TF agreement. Whereas in India, you'd be shocked and surprised, we did it in a flat 1.5 years. We established the single window. It was up and about in 2016. And it's working pretty well. So we already have 6 government agencies which are at the border, which are part of the single window, and we are planning to induct another 46 this year. So that will bring the entire gamut of regulatory agencies on the single window. The other thing which has happened is that in order to have a holistic view of logistics at the border, an institutional mechanism has now been created that has participation from all those that are involved in the movement of goods. So you have at the national level, you have the National Trade Facilitation Committee, which is chaired by the Cabinet Secretary. All the responsible ministries, their secretaries are members of that committee. That committee has put in place what is known as a Trade Facilitation Action Plan. It has been drawn up for 4 years to begin with. It ends in 2020. There are very clear-cut targets about what to do in the area of logistics for each of these regulatory agencies that are involved. And that Trade Facilitation Action Plan is in the public domain. Any of you can pick it up and see it. So the targets are very specific, and everybody knows exactly what to do. The messaging is unified, and that's very important. So this is coming from the senior-most person in government, who's the Cabinet Secretary. And because all the secretaries of the concerned ministries are part of that setup, the messaging is very cohesive and uniform. So everybody down the chain gets the same message, and there is no ambient noise that distorts our working. And then, of course, we periodically measure what we do. So I'll talk about the time release study, which we've done at JNCH. Now, in terms of strategy, what we've done are very common sense things, but yet, they're important. So one of the things, a very powerful tool that we thought, was required to put in to sort of ensure quick clearance was pre-arrival processing. So we've been emphasizing that all the documentation, whether it's for customs or any other regulatory agency, should be filed in advance of the arrival of the goods. Because the time sensitivity for most businesses begins only when the goods arrive. So if you can give us lead time and you can file your documents in advance, all the processing can be done before the goods have actually come in. And then when the goods arrive, they're just good to go. You pick them up from the terminal and you carry them wherever you want to a warehouse or a factory. So there's a lot of emphasis on pre-arrival processing. We've been monitoring advanced filings. And I'm glad to share with you that with all the pushing and shoving, we've managed to get it up to about 62%. We started with a low base of about 15 to 16% in 2016, and that's the time we tried to shore it up through what is now being called the nudge theory in customs. So we're trying to nudge the trade, to file in advance. So that's one part of the story. The second is we've started differentiating for a long time now between those that are compliant and those that are not so compliant. So we do a risk management when filings are done for goods, and the risk management system is not in place just for customs from the revenue point of view, but for all regulatory agencies. So the single window has a risk engine at the back end. Every time a filing is done, that risk engine is run on the data, and it's decided whether that particular consignment needs to be interdicted or it can be allowed to go as a facilitated cargo. The percentage of facilitation has been going up every year, and for sea cargo, we've reached a percentage of about 70%. So 70% of the cargo goes completely untouched by any regulatory agency at the border. It just goes through. It's only the balance 30 where we're quarreling with the release time and such like things. So, and for air cargo, the percentage is much higher. So the facilitation level for air cargo is something like 92%. So it's just about 8% of the consignments that are actually interdicted by any regulatory agency. We've also tried to differentiate between those that are risky and not so risky by having an accreditation program. Many customs administrations do that. So we have an authorized economic operators program, and based on the track record of the entity and their financial standing, we've been assigning different levels of accreditation to importers and exporters, and also logistics operators. So customs brokers and CFSs, terminals, all of them can avail of the authorized economic operators scheme. There are very distinct benefits that come if you enlist as a member of the AO program. And again, we've really had to struggle, believe me, to get people to enlist. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this counterintuitive trend that I notice. There's almost a pessimism towards trade facilitation among the industry, and I'm not able to understand why the industry would not want to avail of the schemes which the government has launched. And I've asked this question in many such fora, and I still haven't got a satisfactory answer. So it takes a lot of hard sell, believe me. And this is not something that the government is good at, but we still have to do it, to sell programs like the Authorized Economic Operators Program or the Direct Port Delivery Scheme or the Direct Port Entry Scheme. So I think as logistics professionals, and I'm not sure whether there are people here from the user industry, but you need to think internally about why there is this reluctance to come on board. Likewise, we have a direct port delivery scheme which has been extremely successful in JNPT and Chennai. These are the two ports that are based, seaports that are based on the CFS model, and we've tried to see that cargo which is not risky, which has been already assessed to be less risky or not risky, is allowed delivery straight away from the terminal itself. It doesn't need to move to a container freight station for all the processing and documentation and all of that. So the direct port delivery has also picked up big time, and there was a very sharp increase or a spurt initially, I think between 2016 and 18. It went up to about 32%, and thereafter we've again sort of given it another push, and it's come up to 42, but that's where it is kind of lingering. And that's another question I leave with you. I'm not able to understand why businesses would not opt for direct port delivery scheme. And there's a study which JNCH had got done in collaboration, by DuPont, which is one of the biggest importers at the port, and CII, and they discovered that there's at least a 75% saving in direct costs if you opt for the direct port delivery scheme. They're big time users of DPD, And if you want an absolute amount, this study was done in November of 2017, so it's a little dated. But for a 20-footer, you save about 7,000 rupees per container. And for a 40-foot container, the saving was about 14 to 15,000. So I think that's substantial if you look at the direct costs that businesses incur at the port. We've tried to simplify documentation, and we're trying to reduce physical interface as much as possible. And that's one of the things which we're unfolding right now. We've launched what is called Turant Customs. It's not just a catchphrase, it's for real. And we don't want brokers and their boys to needlessly come to the custom house for submission of documents and for taking out of charge and all of that. So we've completely automated that process. So you can register the goods electronically. And once you do that, you've paid the duty already. The out of charge is given automatically either by an officer, and we're moving now towards an automated system of out of charge so that nobody needs to approach a customs officer for an out of charge. So we're trying to reduce physical interface as much as possible. So there's e-filing of all documents, there's e-sanchit, you can upload all documents electronically, and if these are documents that are repeatedly required, you don't need to upload them each time. You get a unique number, and that number is good for life. We've done away with that problem also. We're trying to persuade the shipping lines, and again, that's a very tough call, to issue delivery orders electronically. I'm not sure where we are with that, but when I do interrogate and ask them for specifics, I'm told that most of them are doing it, and I presume they are. We're trying also to shore up the port community system, I think, which one of the speakers talked about, because that leads to a lot of data interchange across the entire port community and the users, which makes it easy to carry out business. So those are some of the main things I wanted to talk about that we've done by way of strategy. And we can do all of this and yet not know where we are unless we measure what we're doing. So we do a time release study every year. The calendar is fixed, so 1st to 7th of January of each year, whatever filings happen, we use that data as a basis for determining what is the average release time of cargo, both for import and for exports at JNPT. Last year, we managed to bring about a substantial improvement in the average release time. It came down to 144 hours from what the World Bank had measured it to be. I think they had a figure of 267 hours or something. So that was a very substantial drop. And I think we were given credit for that in the TAB ratings. This year, I cannot let the cat out of the bag. We've completed our TRS 2019. We're about to release it end of this week. And I can just share with you that there's been further substantial improvement. We are on that path. We've identified what are the key things that need to be done and continue to be done for us to continue along the path of reducing release time. In terms of what we need to do in the future, I think we've been less focused on cost. And while we focused a lot on time, which is good, and time has a relationship with cost, but not totally. And I think Julian also spoke about that in his discussion. I think as the industry, you need to think more about what is happening to costs at the border. And from anecdotal evidence, I can tell you that things are not fine. Unfortunately, the realization has not dawned on the industry, or I don't know which players, that this is not a zero-sum game. If you want to reduce release time and release cost, the space that is vacated by one agency cannot be occupied by another, right? But that's exactly what's happening. Whether you look at it in terms of time, we found that we were reducing progressively the time taken by customs and other regulatory agencies at the border. But the space we were vacating is getting filled up by delays in payment of duty, by delays in registration, to some extent, not fully. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to bring about an overall reduction. But I think the industry and the users need to realize that this is not a zero-sum game, where, whether we're talking about time or cost, the space that is vacated by one agency is for real, and therefore others also need to pull the weight. It's a value chain, and the end result will only be as good as the weakest link. So if any of us is not pulling the weight, it's not going to give us results at the end of the day. And that's another learning that comes from our experience. So those are the two things I wanted to mention. The third thing, of course, is the physical infrastructure itself. And as customs, believe me, I'm pushing very hard to get a sense of where we are with physical infrastructure, because we're not users. We're not users of port equipment. We don't know whether there are enough RTGSs, whether there's enough, road connectivity. We just get information on this anecdotally. And Mr. Shetty was referring to, the waiting time at the gates. You'll be horrified to know that from a parking plaza to the terminal gate on the export side, which is a distance of not more than 2.5 kilometers, it takes about 7 to 8 hours for a truck to get there. And then it takes another 85 hours for the truck to enter the terminal and offload the goods. I think that's just too much, even in terms of time. And when you talk about it in terms of cost also, the feedback is that the costs are high. And that's one of the reasons, I think, why we are such a high-cost economy. And the last thing which I want to mention, I'm not a logistics professional, but taking on this theme of holistic thinking, I think somebody needs to connect the dots between logistics of exim trade and the logistics of internal trade. And that's perhaps not happening. There is a little bit of disconnect there. So there are people who are specializing in internal trade, and there are, of course, all of us who think we specialize in exim trade. But the two are not sort of speaking to each other. And I think if you want to derive full benefits from whatever policy changes the government is making, these two also need to come together. So I think that's the last thing I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. One of the points which I think Mr. Joy did not say, but conveyed it very subtly, is that under the AEO, one of the greatest advantages that the government has imposed on the industries, if you recognize and you're registered with them, they're allowing you to take the cargo to your factory without paying custom duty. Now, that kind of fate being reported by the government, I don't think I ever believed if I was in 74, but it's a reality today, and I think we should register with the custom and take the benefit. If we are sincere to what our goals are. Now with this, I'm sorry, I've gone way, way beyond my time. I don't know how to say it, but we give 2 questions. Any 2 questions, not for the organizers. Yes, sir.
Hi sir, my question is to Mr. Mitra and Mr. Shetty. So there are nowadays so many companies who comes up with huge fundings, and they are spoiling market by giving very low rates to corporates. At same time, they are paying huge salaries to the manpower who work in B2B industry and last mile deliveries. So what's your take on this?
Should I?
Please.
Your secrets, internal secrets.
When I started the business, I had to look for profit from day one, because at that time even banks were not lending money. Forget about investors, right? So we had to really struggle to make money, and that is how the organizations got built in those days. But nowadays the organization are not built on those days. Today the organization are built on the base of volume. The investors see that there is there is disintermediation or efficiency or improving the market size, pie of the market, etc., etc. So on the base of that, the investors are looking at funding these companies, and they're willing to burn the money, right? Now, what can you do about that?
So what about companies who are self-funded?
Yeah, I mean, we have no choice but to reduce our margin and remain competitive to the best extent we can. So there were crazy competitors even in the past, but this is getting crazier. So, that's why I think the only way to counter this is by building a scale. So that's what we are looking at, how we can build a scale so that we can bring a larger professional management. We ourselves build digital strategy and technology to bring efficiency and improve our market share, bring those artificial intelligence and IoTs or whatever that can add value to the business, and we have to follow that model. And that's one of the biggest challenge the organization like us are facing today, to change management and also to the investment. Please, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that's a reality of our lives, that there are some private equity companies which are burning money today on both sides. I mean, on the customer side and on the employee side. I think it's a battle that we have to fight every day, and we fight every day. I think the answer, at least that we found, is focus on delivering the best service to your customers. Employ the best technology that you can, and technology is not costly today. You don't have to be a loss-making company to fund technology, whether it's AI, ML, or even a simple handheld. Create the best working culture in your company so that good people stay there. And many of these sort of unicorns, funded companies like this are not necessarily doing well. And the reason why they're not doing well is because they have defocused on many aspects of their business. They try and do 4 things at the same time, land up doing nothing well. So, there are going to be a few of them which will do well and many of them which won't. What we can do as a company that doesn't want to lose money and have investors who want us to make money is do the best we can every day and provide great service.
All right, sorry, there's no second question because you raised 2 questions here. And my organizer on my case.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dignitaries, for enlightening us, educating us on the various aspects of logistics. It's been a great learning this afternoon. And I request all of you to join me in giving a big round of applause. It's time for us to express our gratitude to the esteemed dignitaries on the dais. May I request Mark to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Julian Beavis. Now to Mr. Abhik Mitra. To Mr. Shashikiran Shetty.
I don't know which one of the 60 companies worldwide. Thank you.
And to Mr. Vivek Jory. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Truly indebted for you. I know it's the last week of March and customs have a target to fulfill, and I'm grateful for being with us, spending 4 hours to come here and go back.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Darshana, the former president of Ms. Darshana, former president of Ladies Wing, to Ms. Darshana Joshi to offer a memento to Mr. Mark Fernandez.
For me? For doing nothing?
The chairman of the session, of course.
Thank you. Come have a picture with me. Come.
With our next session, a wonderful topic that we have this afternoon, unfolding the future of retail and financing opportunities. As the retail industry story unfolds in India, new strategies come to the fore. Nicholas Cooper once said, if we don't change the way we think, we will lose a whole generation of consumers. It's time for me now to invite on dais the chairman of the session, Mr. Atul Joshi. Mr. Joshi is the founder and CEO of Oyster Capital Management and Advisory and chairman of IMC's Core Committee on Economic Policy. May I now invite our distinguished panelist, Mr. Robert Lobo is a venture partner with Z Nation Lab, a platform to engage with brilliant young minds in startup world and curate and mentor their ideas. Mr. Surendra Kumar Jalan, MD and CEO of OMI Technologies Private Limited. And I'm, friends, very happy to share with you, is an All India rank holder, chartered accountant, company secretary, and cost and management accountant. Mr. Subodh Mehta, Senior Vice President of Godrej Interior, and the winner of CII Business Excellence Award for the year 2016-17. I would now request Mr. Atul Joshi, Chairman of the session, to take the proceedings further.
Thank you, Saurabh. So we have an excellent panel here. We have a panel which has looked at retail, into the retail clothing, retail furniture, and retail financial services. But let's look at what's happening in the world first. If we look at communication, It got disrupted with the advent of Facebook. It changed the way we communicated. It changed the way what we communicate, and communicate with content was initiated. This second disruption that took place was not in the communication space but in the consumption space. And Amazon brought that. The whole experience of consuming, how we consume, what we consume, how we make a choice, what we pay, how we pay, everything got completely disrupted with the advent of Amazon coming in. But that's just on the retail consumerism side. Retail has two aspects, and typically retail one would associate only and only with products that we all as individuals consume. But there's a very large segment of retail which is on the financial services side. All of us either are borrowers or depositors. So you cannot disassociate financial services from the word retail. And here we are in this session, we're going to talk about retail from both the perspectives with the panelists. And my first question I would like to direct to Robert, that Robert, with this whole new disruptions that have happened, you have all the generations which we call the baby boomers and the millennials and all the generations that in between, how the consumer's whole taste of consumption has changed. What is it that you see in terms of consumer behavior, consumer taste, and what's the role that technology and AI is playing into it?
First of all, thank you for having me here. So I come from a traditional retail background. We managed square feet. Okay. Last 5 years, I've moved into tech-enabled businesses, which is fashion retail and all. So I'll start off with what changed for me, first of all. Managing square feet and return per square feet, we've changed the whole gambit of unit economics. We're managing a consumer at a consumer level, demand at a consumer level. So we are talking about monthly average users versus what is the long-term LTV, what we call as lifetime value for consumer, which was not the way we measured retail business. So on one side, we saw, like you said, we started with discovery being digital. We've all been browsing and getting inspiration from digital. Yeah, that one side changed the way consumer experience products and brands. On the other hand, we are seeing now is the whole fintech coming in at the point of sale. Yeah, bringing another revolution on the other side, and in between lies the whole where the consumer meets the product or product meets the consumer space. In that space, in the last few years, we have seen the amount of work that has happened, and there's a session going on AI there on the other hand, the amount of data that is available out there in the market, and how that data is enabling new business models to come in. So let me give you an example. I come from fashion industry. The biggest issue of a fashion industry, and those who are in the fashion industry will agree with me, is the inventory lag. Okay, 70% of the inventory sells. In fact, sell-through is what we call is 30-40%. 30 to 40% of the inventory has to be deep discounted and out. So that is how the business model runs. And there would be stores which are just burning, not earning, right? And those are the business models we came from. To where we are coming now is, I am able to predict, or let's say data is able to predict and tell me what could be, Atul, your consumption. Yeah, our ability to do deep dive into all the data points that we have and actually bring predictive models. So the question that I always ask now is, if this changes, what does it impact? What impact does it bring in the value chain? Right? How will the value chain change? Because now we're getting to almost a personalized level of selling, almost predictive. Whether it's Swiggy, whether it's and there is a brand in US now called Stitch Fix. I don't know if you guys know that did $1 billion of turnover. Okay, apparel brand, zero discounting, and totally works on AI-led data management at the back. The main guy in this business is the data scientist from Netflix, who's able to predict what will be. So we are seeing a confluence of how consumer-centric data will change consumption. Yeah, sure. and I would know also your propensity to pay coming from the fintech. I know LBS your location based data, where you are located. I would be able to know what is the demand generation in a particular catchment area. I don't need to make estimation. There'll be data point that you come from this place. So those data signals will tell me whether I would need a physicality or not. So online has moved a long way. New models are coming in, and eventually you would certainly need some physicality to give that final experience to the products, particularly in apparel, which are very tactile, touch and feel. So that's my take on this. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that we are moving to predictive models. Predictive models will not just tell us about the consumption, the behavior, the taste, the likes, dislikes, credit history, ability to pay, not ability to pay, but also the physicality of it, which means that you bring in a concept of having physical presence also, despite there being a very large and fastly growing internet model. So let me turn to you, Subodh. While everybody talks about, internet is the platform, that's the growth engine, and you don't need branches, you don't need physical stores, but you can't really do away with that. So nobody is talking about optimization of the two, the physicality versus the internet based sales. So where do you think that the optimization of network comes, and how do you look at it, especially in your company, which is into the furnitures?
So I think it's a very important subject which all companies have to now wrestle with, because now it's very clear that omni-channel, as they call it, unified commerce, whatever, the various names, etc. It's a combination of physical and the digital, or physical, whatever, so many names have come, is going to work. That is for sure. So if you're very sure about it, this is how the future of retail is going to be. You have to look at from two lenses. One, you start with a consumer lens first, that obviously you need to understand consumer journey much better. It's not linear. Sometimes the consumer goes to online and does the buying at offline store, goes to offline first, does the buying at online store, sometimes does it with mobile, sometimes does it with laptop, etc., does the lot of homework research on online, goes to the physical stores just to reconfirm, and then again goes to the online to buy. So his journey is very, very non-linear, it is like crisscross, etc. So you need to understand customer pretty well, his journey, so that you can create a unified customer experience. That is very important. So if a customer comes to your offline store, you need to collect the data which will be used when he goes to the online store. You don't really make him work very hard, you already know about it, and you start giving him the offering suiting to the his needs, etc., the personalization subject we talked about. And same goes with, when he goes to the online, you understand about the customer very well, and when he actually enters the physical stores, the guy, I think already the technology has been applied, that he goes with the mobile, and the store guy already knows that he is coming, and he addresses the person with his name, etc., and that knowledge has been collected when he was actually researching your website online, etc. He already knows what he has already browsed through. He is very clear about it. So he discusses with respect to those particular SKUs, those kind of needs. So he makes things, much better, and gives.
But how do you optimize the two?
Yeah, so that's about from a customer perspective. So you try to improve the customer experience, but saying that you have a very huge, very good customer experience, etc., is one aspect of the coin. Second aspect is how does the company achieve it within the limited resource and capital available. You might see a lot of sort of online guys having a practically abundance of fund, but we have got huge number of examples, the online guys who have closed down.
Okay.
The first home furniture guy already closed down, kind of, right? There are many of them, who are finding it difficult because, and we know that, people are saying online, so online guys are opening offline stores, offline guys are going to online, and that is how they are combining. But in this basically milieu, the companies have to be very clear about it, what is the kind of capital and what is the kind of return on investment they are going to get. So now we have a situation, very complex situation. A company has a number of physical stores, a company has an online store, company has a fulfillment infrastructure, and company wants to now expand and acquire more customers. So the question came, where do we open a next physical store? which will give the enough return of investment, given the fact that possibly in the city you already have one or two already, and you are doing great online, though the cost of acquisition is still high. So how do we optimize that? So there are tools now which has come up, which not only optimize your online, not only optimize the number of stores you have to open in a city, but also consider the online on your fulfillment infrastructure into account, and gives you a very clear idea about where should you basically invest, either in a physical store or you should improve your online presence, etc. You should do more of an advertisement to get the customer rather than trying to open a store. So it gives you a very good idea about it. And I think if companies want to succeed in this complex world, these kind of tools, which are again completely tech based, and they take a lot of input data which is available from the stores online, etc., to tell you, apart from the various trends which is happening, to give you the suggestion. So I think network optimization in a complex world is a need of the hour if you really want to succeed in a long run, and make sure that
so you don't want people who are online to just go offline, or the offline guys to just go online, but do their homework first. And you used a very nice term, unified customer experience, which is while you are online, you would still like to have some personalized experience. While you are still in a shop, could you still enable an online kind of an experience in terms of whether it is payment or delivery or whichever way? Which means that one needs to be really conscious about the financial part of it, and that's where Surendra comes in. So if we were to look at the way the financial services for individuals or for retailers, it has grown. We started with family and friends as for us to borrow from, moved on to banks, then came NBFCs. The latest that have come in are the microfinance institutions. So there is a whole evolution of the lenders that have evolved. But what is it that is next for the retail borrowers? And is there a scope for the retail to behave or to act or have an opportunity to act as a lender?
Yeah, thanks, Atul. Before I start, I will just give you a brief about what we are doing. And it is a new thing which has come into play. RBI has allowed this new form of business, which is again a platform-driven business, which just like Amazon. So we are running a platform, financial platform, where anyone who has a requirement to borrow money can come on our platform, and anyone who has got a surplus money to lend, he can decide which borrower he wants to lend. And this amount could be as low as 500 rupees or 1000 rupees or whatever that the person wants to lend. So this is called the peer-to-peer lending, and this is a new form of lending which has been allowed by RBI last year only. Internationally, this is a almost 10-12 year old business. It started in UK after the 2008 recession, and it has supported the government and it has supported the economy there very well during that point of time when the banks were not lending money. There was a credit freeze everywhere. And that is the time when the individuals started lending to each other individuals. And in the process, we are earning good amount of money. And the individual businesses were also getting the money to run their businesses or for the self-consumption or things like that. RBI took some time. There were no regulation in India. Afterwards, in 2016, RBI said that yes, they want to promote this kind of business in India, because India also in the meantime had a lots of digital print which were there, and it was possible for anyone to assess anyone for whether he is a good borrower or not a good borrower. Also, it was also possible to do all kind of KYC which RBI needs, which were earlier done by all the banks and NBFC through the physical mode, to be done online and very seamlessly without any hassles. Therefore, this peer-to-peer concept has come, and Atul, you have said very well that earlier in the 50 years back or 40 years back, the only means to borrow money was to go to the family and friends, because there were limited number of banks or the as you call the organized sector lenders which were there. And similarly for the people who had got the money, that was the only means to invest their money. So, but the challenge was that you will be knowing maybe 20 people or 25 people, still you will not be knowing the actual financial position of those two. I know Atul, maybe I will say, okay, Atul has asked me some money, I have given that. I don't know whether Atul is creditable guy or
I
not,
am.
because I have met him in the conference, I liked his face and I have given the money, right? But now, in the peer-to-peer, when Atul comes, we do in that assessment. The platform does the entire assessment. He knows what are his civil score, what are the kind of assets he owns, what are the kind of spending he is doing, where is he living, what are his monthly income, what are his monthly expenses, what are the other loans that he has taken. So you do a proper assessment. Now it doesn't matter whether I am in Calcutta or whether I am in Kanyakumari or whether I am in Chandigarh. The lender could be anywhere, the borrower could be anywhere, you have all the information. So you do a very informed decision to make this lending. And think of it like when you go to a bank or a NBFC, etc., you have to go, most of the time you have to go physically, or they will say, okay, we will send our people to your house or so there is a physical leg involved. Here, it's a total digital platform for the lender as well as for the borrower. So when you are traveling from your house to home, or you are accompanying your wife for a shopping, and you are waiting in the shop, you can do the application online for the borrowing or for the you invest whatever money is lying in your bank account. It's as simple as that, and that's possible because of the obviously the digital the mobile penetration that has happened in India, the Aadhaar thing that has happened in India. So lots of digital things are available for which we have used that, leverage those technologies, and I think there are many other players also in this field who have leveraged this technology to provide this seamless experience for the borrower. And the amount borrowing amount could be as low as 5,000 rupees to 25,000 rupees to 2 lakh rupees, which is not economically viable for any lender in the physical world to lend.
Sure. So you're basically saying that you've created a disruption where the borrowers of smaller amounts could actually go online and find a lender. But I think the bigger revolution is probably on the lender side. That as a lender, I did not have a choice on whom to lend, when to lend, what tenor to lend, do my own credit appraisal. But your platform enables me to know the person whom I can lend to, what tenor I lend to, etc. So I think there's a major revolution on the retail investor side, or the people who are on the retail but have surplus cash. So that's, I think, is pretty good. But in terms of the retail, let me ask you, in terms of retail next, where do you see the role of technology, data analytics, or AI, whichever way you call it? What is the kind of disruption that one could see on the retail consumer side?
Yeah, I think a lot of interesting things are happening, so you can really keep on counting those things. But couple of things which I personally find very interesting, which has already happened, which is not very far off, is basically AI getting into the designs. So practically you can have a designer-less design. And this experimentation has already been done, where the lot of data about the customer choices, customer reviews, reactions, offline, online is fed into the system. And on the other hand, you also fed into the system of the constraints which might be there at the back end regarding what fabric to use, what stitching to use, etc. And based on that, finally AI gives you a 50 or the 100 probable designs which are going to do extremely well. So you really don't need a designer. The designer only has to select maybe out of the 50 which one to work. Now the similar thing is what we have been toying it, basically doing it in furniture for the sofa set. So a sofa is available, and it is designed by the designer. So the form, the function, the fabric, everything is basically thought by the designer, and it takes a lot of effort, almost 3 months, 4 months in designing, and then about 3 to 4 months in prototyping, etc. And eventually the cycle is definitely about a year before we actually introduce a product in the market. But when the expectation is, which we want to work on, if AI comes, then the whole process can be actually compressed into 1.5 months to 2 months, because some physical manufacturing which will be required, which is also done nowadays by computerized controlled machines. But the designing process itself and prototyping can be extremely fast. And prototyping is also done on the basically virtual prototyping where you really don't have to create a physical piece. So all the data about what customers have liked, what are the models which have done very well, what is the kind of fabric is working, what is the kind of color trend is happening, what is the kind of activities customer do at home, and therefore, what kind of sofa sets are working. All this data is fed into the system, and the AI comes out with possibly, 25 designs which will work, which also take into account the fact that whatever constraints are there at a manufacturing end. Because if you come out with a design which is, completely dreamy and it can't be converted into the reality, then there's no use. So those data is also put in. So that is the one thing I think is not very far off. I won't be surprised. And I think I've heard that, one of the online guys have already 2 brands which are AI driven brands, where the apparels were actually designed like in this process, and they are supposed to be doing reasonably well. So that is one thing is very interesting. Second thing which is already has happened, so it's not really next, it is already now, is basically doing the search based on the images or the photographs. So there is already a big online player in US where suppose a customer likes a particular sofa, is moving around, he has seen as a neighbor's place, or he is maybe browsing the magazines or any online website, he likes a particular sofa. All he has to do is basically take a pic of that sofa, go to the online site of this player and upload that sofa. Now this guy actually has almost like more than 2 to 3 lakhs SKUs in furniture to offer it to you. Now trying to even search a particular SKU is very difficult. And the kind of SKU which you like with the price, etc., there will be thousands of sofa designs which are available. So how do we select? So when you upload this particular image, the AI does the work, and the 15 or the 20 designs which are quite matching to this particular sofa basically comes out with a complete list with all the prices, all the specifications. So your work, even online search and the homework also has been made it very easy now. So this is something which is already started, and especially it is useful when the number of SKUs on the online website can be really goes into lakhs, etc. And this is, I understand has been a pretty successful feature, and a lot of people are using that.
So I like that word that you use, designer-less design. So something which is very personal could also get replaced by AI. And in a lighter note, if one could simply upload a picture and figure out a matchmaking stuff, it could be the next revolution in the married life. But, that's where I would like to bring in Robert, that, every coin has the opposite side. There are 2 sides of a coin. Like AI is great. AI is going to smoothen our lives, ease it out, and everything else that happens. But is there a side of the AI that we need to be really careful about, especially going into the retail next? Can my taste, my liking, my choice be influenced by AI in such a way that I'm guided towards a specific product or a specific platform or a specific manufacturer? Is there a risk that the AI poses?
So what Subodh was talking about is computer vision, and which is visual search, and we've seen that all those people who use Instagram or Pinterest know that is a technology which has been there in place. So we were searching for words, we can search for images now. But I think what point you're making, Atul, is very critical, and we've seen that in the US elections and other elections, how manipulative systems can be made, because ultimately the algorithms, the code, are written by human beings. Okay, so we have biases when we write code, right? When we are making any algorithm, we are actually biased. A good thing is that industry has recognized this, that these biases are playing out. And there could be biases on gender, color, skin, language, taste. And those biases is what is influencing us to buy, right? And so many people liked it, so I should buy it. This one influenced me, so I should buy it. So we are all influenced by, our buying is influenced, right? Yes. When we went for shopping, our family influenced us to buy. Ye lena chahiye, wo lena chahiye, right? So now somebody whom we do not know is influencing us to buy by likes, hearts, thumbs up, everything, okay? But I think it has come to a serious point for technology, which is where I indulge mostly now in, is an ability, and you would have seen that in the other session there, which is what we call as deep tech. deep learning, which is the fag end of where AI is now, which I'm not dwelling too much into technology, which is generated adversarial networks or convolutional network ability to remove those biases, and the system develops those influences. Okay, and we are moving into that space now. So human interference in writing code coming through biases would be nullified, and I strongly believe this is a reality we will see. So to answer your question, yes, currently you can be influenced, right? And we are influenced, which movie to watch, what to buy. But the way tech is getting developed, I'm sure this will be, nullified over a period of time through the computer-generated adversarial networks, which is where the tech is going.
Sure. So from political perspective, just to, again, on the lighter note, that, the political parties probably pay money for people to come in and, show that there are a lot of people. If there was a disruption there, then, only the genuine people who are interested in listening would come in. But, the same risk that, it's a good thing that you said that people have actually recognized the fact that you can be influenced. I think it's a major step here. And if that could be overcome by usage of machine or AI itself developing its own algorithm, a lot of biases could be done away with, and a lot of checks could be probably brought in to ensure that such biases are dealt with properly. But the same thing, which is a risk on the consumption side, is also the risk on the financial services side. And in a tech-enabled or fintech model of lending, borrowing, investing, again there are risks that one needs to be really aware of. And once the risk becomes a reality and then acknowledging, then realizing it, probably it's too late in the day. So, Surendra, if you could probably talk about what kind of risks that, the borrowers and the lenders in the retail space could potentially face when they use a fintech platform.
See, as far as...
and I'm a good borrower, just for a change.
You are probably a lender, not a borrower. So as far as the data is concerned, see, in the fintech, most of the fintechs are regulated, whether it's by the RBI or IRDA or SEBI, etc. So the use of data, which say probably a Facebook can do or Amazon can do or someone else can do, is not so much possible, because there are lots of regulation on how we can use the data, how should we store the data, how we should be collecting the data, all those things. So it's the data risk as such, I will say, is not so much in the fintech, unless obviously there is someone doing a fraud or someone doing some malintention. That's a different thing. But otherwise, the data misuse in a fintech is very, very limited, thanks to the very strong regulators that we have got in our country. But as far as the risk, what are the risks for the lender and the borrower? I will say the ease of doing a business has a side effect, both in positive terms and as well as in the negative terms. So negative terms, when I say positive terms, is that yes, you can in 5 minutes you can apply and get approved for a loan. 5 minutes you can also invest. But if you, those 5 minutes, if you don't put proper attention in selecting, say for example, if you want to lend 50,000 rupees and you have not put any attention in scrolling through the borrower profile and just put the press the button that yes, I want to invest, that is the risk that is there. Similarly, when so many people are chasing one particular borrower, say because of the ease, because the technology is available, once a borrower is there online, he has taken an online loan from one platform, he might go to many other digital lender, because he has found that it's so easy. It's in 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour I can get the loan. He may overborrow. So that is the risk that he runs, that he may overborrow, he may get into the debt trap. Similarly, as I said, in the lender, if he is not doing the proper profiling, and he is just, because of the ease, he is just investing, that could lead to some kind of risk for him.
Sure. So basically, nothing is risk-free. So everything comes with a price, and whether it is technology or human intervention. So I think the session today will kind of running behind schedule. So sum it up, in terms of the retail consumer side, online is not an answer, offline is not an answer. I guess the answer towards the future retail next is going to be a very nice term used, unified customer experience, where you would combine the experience of online with an offline. Only online will not work. Offline will not work. A combination of the two without an experience would also not work. So somewhere a triangle of all the three things put together would need to be worked out. Similar on the financial side, there are borrowers, there are lenders. I think a small revolution, there's a first step that has happened. I think yours is the first. Surendra's NBFC is the first NBFC recognized by RBI, which is a P2P platform. And I think there's a small step towards a revolution on the borrowing side for small borrowers. But also I think it's a much bigger revolution for the lenders, where even if I have 15,000, 20,000 rupees, I could make a choice. Now this is where I think the difference is. If I was to go to a portfolio manager, I need to pay 25 lakhs minimum. Here I have 25,000 rupees, I have a choice. Whom to lend, what time frame to lend, what interest rate to lend. So I think there are revolutions that are happening, and all of these are fraught with risks. While on the consumer side, you could have influence from the various platforms. On the retail side, you run the risk of overborrowing or overlending. So I think it's going to be a process before we reach an optimal point. We need to figure out and guard ourselves. What message I think I would like to give is that the very pace of disruption has been disrupted. So there is a disruption that was happening every 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. That pace of disruption itself having been disrupted, you might get disrupted every alternate week. So be on your guards while you consume, borrow, or lend. Thank you very much. I don't think we have time for question answer. So, over to you, Saurabh.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. It's time for us to express our gratitude to the eminent panelists. So may I request Mr. Atul Joshi to please offer a token of memento to Mr. Robert Lobo, Mr. Surendra, sorry. Now to Mr. Surendra Kumar Jalan. Please, please. Now to Mr. Subodh Mehta, please. May I now request Mr. Mahesh Thakkar, if he is present here, to Mr. Mahesh Thakkar to come forward and offer a token of appreciation to Mr. Atul Joshi. Last but not the least is the session on global perspective, retail globally and how they view India as a market. More retailers are going for global growth in order to capture a share of expanding online market. Chad Hurley once said, "The power of digital disruption over physical retail outlets is you have a chance to create a global audience." I would request to present a small video. We have a video clip on Alibaba giving the retail a new dimension for you to have a look at it.
A mobile revolution is changing the way people do business in China. Companies there are integrating brick and mortar stores with cell phones to create a more high-tech consumer experience. That's because China says 98% of its web traffic comes from cell phones, compared to just over 40% in the U.S. Ben Tracy shows us how that's changing the way people shop.
It's lunchtime in Shanghai, and there are plenty of cooks in this restaurant's kitchen.
But when the food is ready, you won't see any wait staff. Instead, dishes are delivered by these robot pods on a high-tech track that quickly guides them to their destination.
I've never seen anything like this before. Have you seen anything like this before you came here?
This customer says this is so classy and fun, and the food is delicious too. The robot restaurant is inside a rapidly growing Chinese grocery store chain called Hema, that's hippo in Mandarin, where almost everything is done digitally. It's owned by Alibaba, one of the largest e-commerce companies on the planet. It also owns Alipay, the most used digital payment service in China. Its chairman, Jack Ma, is now trying to reinvent brick-and-mortar retail by fully merging it with e-commerce, designing physical stores around our smartphones. He calls it new retail.
The entire experience at these stores is based around their app. You can scan every single product that they have on the shelves. For instance, with this lettuce, you can find out which day it was delivered to the store, at what temperature, on which truck, and they even give you recipes for what you can make with it.
But these people will also do your shopping for you. Online orders show up on workers' devices. They grab the goods off the shelves, and a conveyor belt then whisks the bags to the back of the store. The food is boxed up and rolled out to a delivery driver, who then brings it directly to the customer's house, all in about 30 minutes.
China's become the laboratory for creating new models of innovation for online to offline retail sales. Who's buying coffee right now?
Sean Ryan runs China Market Research Group in Shanghai. He says China is 2 to 3 years ahead of the U.S. when it comes to merging e-commerce and traditional retail.
All of the new concepts for retail is starting with the mobile phone at the center of the experience. While in the United States, most of the retailers, like a Walmart, are trying to force a e-commerce experience onto brick and mortar.
Amazon does have its Amazon Go stores where purchases are made through their app and no checkout is required. But in roughly the same time that it launched 8 stores in the U.S., Alibaba has rolled out 100 Hema stores in China, where you can even pay with facial recognition because nobody here carries cash.
Don't need to use cash.
Yeah, no cash.
Yes, no cash. I have no cash.
Have there been problems with growth this big and this fast?
So Hema has become so popular and has grown so fast in the last year that we're starting to hear concern.
Thank you. I am pleased to invite now Ms. Sunita Ramnathkar, chairperson of the session. Ms. Sunita is the director of Aurora Enterprise and co-chairperson of International Business Committee of IMC, which is hosting this conference. Ms. Ramnathkar, please come. Our distinguished guest for this session, Mr. Bhaskar Som, please, and Mr. Sunil Mirani. I request Ms. Sunita Ramnathkar to take over the session now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the last session to the valedictory, and I want to introduce to you to the very important people in the retail. One is Mr. Bhaskar Som. I've been hearing about him since I was in college, actually, and Mr. Sunil Mirani. Now, both of these are very important to the retail as they are a part of the next gen retail. He represents the Flint company IRR, which actually does the research on retail, and he represents the big data company. So both of them will give you a perspective of what they think the retail will go in India for years to come. I pass over to Mr. Som.
Can I have my presentation on? Or I will just... respected chairperson and fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here. The topic about retail, I would say disruptions in retail. When we were growing up, Encyclopedia Britannica was something which every child used to treasure as a possession. And we all used to look forward to Encyclopedia Britannica as a knowledge source. But after 224 years of existence, no one now knows about Encyclopedia Britannica. Wikipedia has replaced it. Encyclopedia Britannica used to cost something like, I think, around 1 lakh rupees when it went out of print. Wikipedia is free. And for that matter, Kodak. When we were growing up, the Kodak moment was something like a cherished photograph, which used to capture whatever important was happening at that point of time. Now the new definition of Kodak moment is going out of market relevance. So you no longer have market relevance. What's happening is that over the years, digital disruption or technology disruptions has played a key role in making this kind of transformation. If we go back to the journey of retail, it all started as Retail 1, when the first self-service centers were opened in US. That was around 1916. So customers had the convenience to go pick up whatever article they wanted and go and pay at the counter. Then became the era of efficiency, where big box retail came in, hypermarts, supermarkets, the Walmarts, those came up. The era of experience came with the e-commerce coming in the picture, like Amazon and all. And now we are talking of Retail 4, where basically offline and online will get integrated. We already saw a glimpse of that in Alibaba's small video. What basically means in online and offline getting integrated is just talking about the Alibaba example. In 2000, Alibaba has this concept of a single day sales. So they have this Big Bazaar has a Big Bazaar day. So Alibaba has that one day sale which they advertise very strongly. In 2017, on that particular Alibaba day, they sold 27 billion US dollars worth of goods over the Alibaba e-marketplace. More than 91% of this was brought through mobile. There were more than 1.5 billion transactions done that day. And most important, and this is where the integration of online and offline comes in, this was distributed through 6,000 mom and pop stores. So Alibaba beforehand itself went ahead, had those networking in place with 6,000 mom and pop stores in the locality, so that the moment a customer purchased an item, it was delivered to that customer's door within 30 minutes. So $27 billion worth of goods were sold and delivered to the customer's gate or to the doorstep in 30 minutes. That is what integrating is all about, and that is what Retail 4 is all about. Next slide. Of course, there have been technology disruptions in the past. So we had bullock carts and then railways to spacecrafts. Next slide. But what is different with this present disruption that is happening in the retail chain is that there are 8 big emerging areas that are redefining retail. But before that, I will again go back to early 1990s when first data analysis and data warehousing started coming in the retail industry. So what some US retailers realized was that there was a very strong correlation between beer sales and sale of baby diapers. They were intrigued, but then they realized that parents, when they have the newborns, they stay back during the weekend at homes. Then the mother will ask the father to go and pick up diapers. The dad knows he has to spend time at home over the weekend, so let's pick up some beer. And they also realized that sales was therefore faster for those shops which had the display of beer and the diapers right at the entrance, so that the father could go pick it up and go. So that was probably the starting step of retail disruptions. Now, 8 things are playing a very strong role. One is IoT. We all know what IoT is, so it's just scanners. So if we have, for example, a liquid dispenser, the moment it reaches a level, it will send a signal so that it gets automatically refilled. But the other important part where it is influencing retail is, suppose my credit card and mobile are integrated, something of the JAM framework that we talk about. In that case, suppose I like to eat at KFC. I like to have that KFC chicken. So I'm in a retail mall. I'm walking past the KFC store. The KFC store will immediately identify, here is this customer who loves to go to a KFC store around this part of time. So I will get an alert on my mobile that right now in the next 15 minutes you walk up to our store, you will get a 25% discount on your purchase. And so that's how IoT is influencing. Drones we have already seen, where food, I mean, for example, even in that pizza joint in US, they are sending over once the pizza is cooked, it goes to the customer's plate through a robot or through a drone. Machine learning, big data, they are all over. But one important thing that is happening over there is also facial recognition technology. So for example, in China, as you enter the store, they will take your facial recognition. They will immediately know that this person, this age group, they will search the database, find out, okay, these are his credentials, these are his past purchases. And so they immediately know your customer profile, what you need to buy, what your preferences are, and accordingly will give you customized offerings. Of course, there's a big question about here about privacy, but we are not getting into that right now. Robotics. Robotics, of course, in terms of supply chain, in terms of movement of goods, plays a very strong role. But what again robotics has done is that in US, there's this Chinese company called Tianun Garments. So each of this robotic machine costs around $1 million, and they produce 1.2 million t-shirts per year, each of these robotic lines. So they have invested some 25 those robot machines over there. Each robot machine's productivity is 17 times that of a worker's. They have also found out that the manufacturing cost for t-shirts, labor cost for t-shirts in a country like Bangladesh is $0.25. That is around 15 rupees. 15 rupees is the labor cost for making one t-shirt in Bangladesh. This robotic plant will also produce it at similar cost. 3D printing, that's again something very innovative. I mean, I can now manufacture, I can now buy a gun, I mean, print a gun which will actually fire to 3D printing. And what it means is that customers, for whatever products that they want, they just give the sample and it's immediately replicated and sent back to you. So over there again, Staples has come out with certain kind of 3D printing offering for corporates where you can create presents and gift articles based on whatever you want. Digital traceability, this is again something on the supply chain. So what that does is your entire supply chain as to like who is supplying that vendor, all that will be traced. So when I am buying an article, I will immediately know through that supply chain that this was the initial manufacturer of that good. Augmented reality, virtual reality, we have already talked about. And finally is blockchain. Blockchain, more a cryptocurrency stuff, but blockchain is also playing a very strong role in defining brands because each and every participant in that blockchain will be giving the votes. So the higher the vote, it's like when we buy on Amazon, that Amazon 4 or 5 score is there, but we do not know who has given those votes. In a blockchain integrated world, we also know who is giving those votes. And accordingly, it gives a much more reliable, much more trustworthy, a much more better definition of who the strong brands are. Next slide. Next slide. But now what we are also seeing is that along with this, and this we saw in the OEM space, in the car manufacturing space in the late 1990s, early 2000s, where the OEMs focused on managing the brand and outsourcing the rest. So thereby, there was a tierization structure which came in the entire auto OEM industry. The same thing has happened now in the retail industry, where big corporates are just managing the brand and everything else is being outsourced. So you go to most of the retail outlets in Europe, you buy any trouser, jackets, whatever, look into the tag inside. It's either made in Bangladesh or in Vietnam or in China or in Sri Lanka. Next slide. So now coming to the conundrum in retail. What we have seen over the years is that 1/3 of the malls had closed, but 90% sales are still online. Whereas in Alibaba's single purchase day or Alibaba's whatever we see, over 90% of the customers buy through mobile. So this is a very big conundrum in which one is not sure how the future is going to evolve. Next slide. Coming from an India perspective, what we see is that I mean, there are very, very strong growth enablers for India, the demographic dividend, and I mean, people are much better aware of the advantages India offer. So I will not dwell much into that. Next slide. But coming to the part on retail, retail from an India perspective, which is probably the focus of this session, is that while shops have closed down, it is equally true that a lot of new shops also have come up. What is important is that boring retail is no longer drawing customers, but if retail can be packaged attractively, then shops are attracting customers, and shops will indeed expand and continue to grow, as we also saw in the Alibaba experience. In terms of attractiveness, India is definitely very attractive as a target destination. ATKN's ranking puts India higher than China, and the gap between the third and first is quite significant. Malaysia is at 60, Turkey 59, UAE 59, China 70, India 71. So what we see is that India definitely is a very key attractive retail market from a global perspective. And we also see it in the kind of companies entering India. So Capital Land from Singapore is opening 2 malls in India. We have Blackstone Group who has come out with Nexus Malls. Walmart is planning to open 30 more new malls in India. Amway Group, 50 more retail stores. Harris, the British shoemaker, they are planning to enter India. Skechers, we already see Skechers shoe shops. They are planning to add another 500 retail stores in India. Bang & Olufsen, a stereo speaker system from Denmark, they are planning to open another 10 stores. IKEA Group already come to Hyderabad. Now they are talking about opening this big outlet in Mumbai. Miniso, the Japanese outlet, which we have started seeing in some malls now, they are planning to open 800 more stores over the next 2 years. So, as we see, retail is growing in India. Retail stores are getting opened. But what is also happening is that it's more about organized retail rather than unorganized retail. So, just to give you a perspective, today's Economic Times, the first page says that India's consumer industry has degrown. There's a 1% negative growth in the Indian consumer industry. My next door neighbor works in one of the big FMCG companies. So I told him, your market is degrowing. I thought India is such a big country, demographic dividends, your market should be growing. He said, yes, we are growing at 15%. And so if you read the news further, you will see that all the organized players have been growing at 10 to 15% minimum over the last 1 year. While data is a big challenge, and how data and all that is collated are issues, but what I would tend to think that as India tends to develop further, it will be making way for unorganized retail, and it will be the organized retail which will integrate the unorganized retail and grow as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Som. You have shown that your research is really spot on, where organized retail will encompass the non-organized retail, and they'll grow together to serve the entire India. But there is a big challenge, and data analytics will show how we are going about what happened in America and whether the same thing can be replicated in India in his research. I request Sunil Mirani to.
Can you load this, please? Okay, so this is, I guess, the topic I was asked to speak on. And again, I'll clarify that while most of my examples here will be US-centric, I think not a bad thing, because I guess one can imagine that a lot of these technologies might come here sooner than later. That's not to say that there could be some technologies or applications which will be purely made in India for India. So that could also happen. But I just thought I'll share this, and hopefully that will be of interest. So I think overall, I think we've come a long way, not to come here to this conference, but in general, we've come a long way from the agrarian
from this agrarian economy where the farmer was the main source of production. So let's call it the expert. He knows the weather condition, soil condition, and used all the tools at his disposal. To the next era, which is the automation age, where again, I guess the primary factor of production would be the machine and all the processes around it. To the third era, which is of data and computing, where again the primary source of production being computing power and data. To where we are now. Call it whatever you want. Forrester calls it the age of the consumer. Carl Schwab calls it the fourth industrial revolution. Whatever you call it, the big change here is that unlike in the previous three phases where the emphasis was on any one source, the expert, the machines, the data, now what we are seeing is there's a confluence of all these three coming together, data, experts, and intelligent machines, to kind of create this hurricane, which comes in the form of disruption across several industries. Yeah, sorry. So take data, for example, right? It's getting bigger and more varied. Of course, transactional data has always been around, but now voice is the new data. We just saw earlier in the clip, even images, your face is increasingly an important source of data. Imagine what will happen when your thoughts also gets added to it. So this data is becoming huge, and what companies are doing is applying very sophisticated algorithms to kind of combine this data and find interesting uses of creating value. And there was a case where in the past, and one could argue some companies are still there, where the data is still in silos, moving to a stage where they'd like to combine this, break the silos, build data lakes, and move to a future where they can make certain real-time decisions. But what we are seeing is that the future is already here. A lot of companies we're interacting with have been able to merge this data and make almost real-time decisions. And this is happening across industries, but none more so than retail, which is the world I'm familiar with, and where clearly data and analytics is at the heart of this disruption. And what we're seeing is a lot of interesting data being left behind by consumers through the e-commerce channel, through the store, or through voice-assisted devices, reviews, ratings, etc. And the retailers, on the other hand, are using all these varied data sources to significantly improve the consumer experience by way of better delivery, maybe by better personalization, by recommendations and promotions tailored for you, and going forward, even to perhaps give you an offer and give you a product which you didn't know you wanted. And that's what we're saying deep thought, deep commerce. So what I've tried to kind of quickly capture here, and by this is no means exhaustive list, but I just thought some 7 interesting applications of emerging technologies that we're seeing. More the app, not the core technology, but the applications of AI and emerging technologies in retail. So start with hyper-personalization. Of course, any brand marketers here would know that the world has moved on from the broadcast marketing to increasingly going to more personalized and one-to-one. And now moving to where it's to a stage what experts call the dynamic personalization, where it's to the individual by channel. And I think no company does it better or exemplifies this than this company Stitch Fix, which was a company set up in 2011, so relatively new in Cambridge, Massachusetts, set up to sell women's fashion. And it would be no exaggerating to say that this is more a technology company masquerading as a fashion company than the other way around. I think it has over 100 data scientists and analysts out of its team of 5,000. And they use over 50 algorithms on a day-to-day basis from varied part of their operations, right? From selecting what choice they should offer you to the consumer, to where it should be delivered from, to assigning each one of his consumers to one of their 3,000 stylists that they have, to customizing the product for you. So as you can say, it's a technology company. So take this item, each item of clothing, in this case this woman's dress, is broken down into 50 to 75 attributes. The person, the shape of the person is broken into 30 different attributes. All these are kind of put into a model and outspits the algorithm, which then gives you choices. Unstructured data is taken on top of that. And then of course you have that stylist who kind of adds the human touch and creates this kind of customized offering to the consumer. So excellent consumer experience, and of course market rewards it. It's a little over $1 billion in the few years it's been in existence, 1.2 billion in revenue and almost $3 billion in market cap. The second one is, and which is happening a lot, is proliferation of chatbots, which kind of had its genesis in the call center days to just automate mundane tasks, but eventually now moving on to create personalized offers, whether in a restaurant in this case or MasterCard, where again they have all your past purchase history and are able to offer you in the right moment offer you the relevant offering, and which hopefully can even move on to the government services, like in this case passport renewals. Voice, clearly the new frontier in brand marketing. It's almost voice is the new search with all these voice assisted devices coming there. This has tremendous implications for retailers and brand marketers, because imagine in the world of search, if you come in the first page, worst case second page, you're okay. Imagine in a voice search coming up number 3 or 4, there's going to be no patience for anyone to buy anything else. And this is just from these home devices. Imagine when voice gets integrated into your refrigerator, washing machine, etc. So interesting applications on voice based. Next one we are seeing, very interesting one, is AI generated marketing content. And this is more relevant in today's day and age of Amazon, where if you have any product which is a branded one and can be easily priced compared to Amazon, it's a very difficult situation. So companies are trying to fight this by bringing their own private label. But the flip side of bringing private label is you don't have that much unique generated content. So increasingly we are seeing AI being brought to bear over here, where let's take this black lamp. You get the packaging, you see the image, the machine runs through it, extracts the attribute, generates the first level of content, which again then is analyzed, or rather it's more than finalized by through the human analyst to kind of make a unique content. And this can be done over and over again, and crunching what otherwise would have taken laborious 10-15 days into few hours. We're also seeing the next trend we're seeing is toolification of analytics using AI, again if I were to call it. So generally in the past, again, this was required, where when you run analytical models, there are usually 3 steps to it, or 3 modules. There's the data validation, the model configuration, and then the output through which you make the decisions. Now increasingly, as the number of data sources increases, the number of variables increases, if you have to run thousands of models, no human being can do it, or it will take very long. So again, AI is brought to bear, where you can almost industrialize this sort of model creation and use it to make decisions across the store, right? From what products you should, what you should carry, how you should price it, how you should use it in your store layout. And this is just a merchandising example. Like that, you can have applications of toolifying analytics for repeatable problems that you're seeing all the time across the retail, entire retail function. And I'm zipping through because I got a note to conclude in 2 minutes. The next one we're seeing is share of self-analysis. And again, as you've probably noticed from all of this, a lot of these problems are not new. But what's new is that the availability of data that is there, the need to make decisions at a speed and frequency like you didn't have to do earlier. But the good news is you have the tools and the capability to do that. So take this one, share of self, right, which is an age-old thing. It's a very important problem, which again, retailers need to have a share of self analysis, because they need to understand what's gone out of stock, how is their planogram compliance, etc. And the consumer brands whose product is being displayed, it's important for them. They need to understand how well the retailers are carrying their product, when it's going out of stock, the pricing, the promotion, etc. Now, again, the analytic applications coming into picture here. So if you take, instead of having people go across shelves, you take the images and then have the algorithms run through it, just like it's been used elsewhere. So now you and I know this is a plane, this is a horse and a dog and a person, but the algorithms don't. They need to be trained on this. So they need to detect with a, I don't think you can see that, but it detects, it boxes the image to see what is it, in this case an airplane, with what degree of confidence, it's 99. That sports ball, it shows 68%. You and I know with full degree of confidence, the machine doesn't, but it needs to be trained. And that same logic is used and brought to bear in the retail world, where again, you take the picture of the shelf across and then just send it somewhere to companies like us, where we would analyze this. The algorithm would detect where are the bottles, in this case, so identify the product, identify the prices, the promotions on that, and give the result. And then finally, the autonomous store, and I think we saw some of that in the China example too, which is kind of an amalgamation of all these technologies, image processing, AI, machine learning, data, all brought to bear to create a fantastic experience. And I've been there myself, and I can tell it is a phenomenal experience of just going there, taking what you want, and getting out. Now, though what I want to end by saying is, I know while this whole discussion was around technology and the greatest technology and AI and all that, let's not forget there's still room for the human. As they say, artificial intelligence is no substitute for natural stupidity. So it is going to be a man-machine paradigm. What the man can do and what the machine does will keep changing, but there's always going to be a role for the analyst. And that's why we say in our world, AI is not artificial intelligence, it's more of augmented intelligence, and which is, I think, the future of all decision making. And as someone from Dell said, it is like the new electricity. And this is what I do every day for the last 19 years. With me and my colleagues, we've been doing it and deploying it for some of these companies like that. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I zipped through that. But
Thank you so much, Mr. Mirani.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are questions within the audience.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty old in the field of logistics. Okay, 74 I joined. India is known worldwide the best software developing nation. Even hardware we're getting there now, but software we are known. But none of the softwares, be it in the shipping, be it in the customs, be it in the airport, live up to expectations. How much downtime do we have? It's unbelievable. If we compare, I just had a conference of the World Custom Organization where we had 160 countries, custom officers here. And I mean, we are good. We have got new systems in place, but our downtime is unbelievable. And that sets us back. And I can understand why Wipro, TCS, the big boys. I mean, could I have some reason why it fails in India and not abroad?
I've been instructed to limit this to one question only. Okay.
so I guess in the context of this, I think all I can say is the industry context matters, right? In the US, again, which is the world I'm familiar with, whichever industry is highly competitive, there's a lot of historical data, and a need to make even 1 percentage point makes a huge difference. I think that's where then analytics come into picture, and therefore all the downstream.
But the analytics will analyze the historic data and the present data. How do you fix it for future? How do you make decisions for the future? How the person, because it's so dynamic, everything is changing. What I do today, I may not do tomorrow. So how does data analytics help the person to make me buy certain thing tomorrow, which I bought yesterday and I might buy today, but I may not buy tomorrow.
So that's true picking. There are various, as I shared in one of my slides, there are so many demand signals today. So yes, you have historical data, but you have also consumer demand signals or intent signals. So for example, what I search.
You know the famous case of Tesco in America? Does anyone know this famous this thing of Tesco? So there was this family who shopped in Tesco every time because they were living next to Tesco. And they were pregnancy. So the whole family, which included a teenage girl and boy and the father, mother, everybody. So one day the father notices that this teenage girl is getting a lot of stuff on pregnancy, how to rear a child and how to, the vitamins used for pregnancy, the hospitals available, everything. So the father's furious. He says, how dare you send my daughter such kind of literature? And she's a teenager. After a few months, they all realized that she's pregnant. So the data people knew about her pregnancy even before she did. How did that happen?
Because how did the pregnancy happen, or how did they?
I'm sure everyone knows how pregnancy happened.
No,
how did they know?
Because as I said, there's so many. Today the sophisticated algorithms can very clearly put all these various data signals, which includes what you've bought, what you're searching for, and what activity you're doing in various channels can be brought together and kind of create the result.
Yeah, somehow I feel that's too much invasion on privacy. And like some nations like EU and all have put restrictions on that, but India is not yet aware of it. So we are very freely using our mobiles, doing everything, and we are.
But if you saw that China example where the facial recognition, now that would never I won't say never, but that will take a while in other countries because of privacy concern. China, there is no privacy concern. Every consumer knows I don't have privacy and they're okay with it. In exchange, they're getting a service of convenience.
Thank you. Thank you very
So
much.
this is data for you, and this is retail for you. Any questions, please ask them over the valedictory.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure
Yes,
having
and
you, and my honor.
I just have to request you to felicitate both our distinguished panelists. So may I request the chairperson of the session to present our token of appreciation to Mr. Bhaskar Som. Thank you, sir. And now Sunita ji to Mr. Sunil Mirani. May I request Ms. Anuradha PT to come forward and felicitate Ms. Sunita Ramnathkar, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us this afternoon. It's been a great session. I would request all of you to please assemble for the valedictory session in the ballroom, where we have our special guest, Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan, CEO of Bombay Stock Exchange. Thank you.